If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description. Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200 plus audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.
Chapter 61, Breaking Through. Attack. Seeing the retreating Sand Shinobi squad, Minato Namikaze gave the order. Shishi and the other two immediately used the body flicker technique to pursue. As they closed in, they hurled Minato's flying thunder god Kunao with all their might. The retreating Sand Jonin glanced back, adjusted his position, and easily dodged one of the Kunao. But in the next instant, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a figure appearing right in front of him. What? The Sand Jonin was shocked, but before he could react, Minato's raised Nan was already crashing down, striking its mark with precision. Boom! The Sand Jonin's body was sent flying, crashing into the ground and creating a massive crater, kicking up a cloud of dust. Leader! The remaining three Sand Shinobi cried out in shock and immediately halted. Shishi Hashida and his companions rushed forward. Body flicker technique. Crescent moon dance. Demonic illusion, false surroundings technique. With Kurama Sanayo's assistance, they used a group genjutsu to disrupt the enemy. Shisui Uchiha used the body flicker technique to overwhelm the enemies, swiftly eliminating them. Shishi Hashida, although slightly slower, also managed to defeat his opponent in a single strike. Retreat! Minato ordered, leading Shishi and the others out of the town to rest temporarily on a nearby mountain. They consumed soldier pills to replenish their stamina and drank water to rehydrate. The four rested silently, without any conversation. Shishi lowered his gaze, reflecting on today's battle. His blue flame sky blade was as sharp as ever, its intense heat capable of melting steel in an instant. But my speed was lacking, Shishi acknowledged his shortcomings. Or rather, compared to the level of a Jonin. He had an extraordinary reaction time, with dynamic vision that gave him a significant advantage in close combat. But it wasn't everything. Even Uchiha Sasuke, with his Manjiki Sharingan and powerful insight, could clearly see Killer Bee's movements but was still suppressed by Killer Bee's swordsmanship. This was because Killer Bee's attack speed was fast and relentless, even though Sasuke's eyes and mind could keep up, his body couldn't move fast enough. Against Chunin, Shishi could use the chakra-enhanced strength technique he learned from Tsunade to overcome any gaps in speed or power, along with his highly responsive nerves giving him a huge advantage. But against Jonin, his speed wasn't fast enough. Or rather, his attack speed wasn't fast enough. If it weren't for Shisui Uchiha earlier, he wouldn't have been able to take down that Sand Jonin by himself. Speed. Apart from training and pure chakra bursts, lightning release can also enhance it. The first thing Shishi thought of was the activation of all the body's cells through lightning release. Thanks to his fast reaction time, his attack speed was already exceptional among Chunin, even comparable to some Jonin in Tsunade's eyes. But people are never satisfied. Moreover, on the battlefield, Chunin don't always face only other Chunin. Shishi naturally hoped that even if he couldn't defeat a Jonin, he would at least have the ability to escape. Can fire release enhance speed? Shishi's thoughts quickly shifted back to fire release. Among all the various techniques, he had the highest aptitude in fire release, making it the easiest for him to achieve results. Fire release also has the characteristic of causing explosions. The shockwaves from an explosion could indeed create propulsion. Shishi brainstormed. An hour passed in the blink of an eye, and their rest came to an end. Under the cover of night, Shishi and the others headed to the third town. From this point on, Minato Namikaze changed his combat strategy. Instead of infiltration and annihilation, they switched to hit-and-run tactics, striking swiftly and retreating before moving on to the next target. Over the course of the night, Shishi's team hit 4 towns in the northern region of the Land of Rivers, throwing the area into chaos. However, the forces of the Sand Village were also mobilized, leaving them unable to focus on the towns of Hagu Town and Shanliao Town, both of which were closer to the Land of Fire. These 2 locations were successfully occupied by the follow-up Konoha squads, becoming the rear support for Minato's team. Additionally, as Minato's team continued their raids, drawing numerous Sand Shinobi squads into the fray, many small towns and villages in the northern Land of Rivers were left defenseless, allowing Konoha's forces to quickly infiltrate. Undoubtedly, their tactical objectives had been initially achieved. As dawn approached, Shishi Hashida opened his eyes inside a cave. After 3 hours of rest, he had fully recovered. Not far away, Shisui Uchiha also woke up. The two exited the cave, found a nearby spring, and washed their faces, then took over the watch from Minato Namikaze and Kurama Sanayo. Without Minato's exceptional sensory skills, Shishi and Shisui had to expand their vigilance range. 2 hours passed in a flash. Standing atop a tree, Shishi spotted shinobi approaching from downstream. The sand shinobis were here. Shishi immediately retreated and regrouped with Shisui, only to discover that sand shinobi were also coming from the west. They returned to the cave to wake Minato and Sanayo. Minato quickly used his sensory jutsu and, after a moment, said, "It's not just the south and west, there are enemies to the north and east as well." Shishi wasn't surprised. Although Minato had the Flying Thunder God technique, his chakra wouldn't allow him to teleport the entire team recklessly. And since they had left traces, it was inevitable that they would be tracked down. Not to mention, this was all part of the plan. Their squad's mission was to disrupt the Sand Shinobi's formations and force them to mobilize their forces. The Sand Shinobi likely realized this, but they had no choice but to encircle and eliminate Minato's team. If they didn't neutralize Minato's squad, they wouldn't be able to focus on Konoha's reinforcements, especially given the impressive combat power and destructive capability Minato's team had demonstrated. "Sensei, our mission objectives have been achieved. Should we break through to the east next?" Sanayo asked. Minato Namikaze replied, "Based on my current sensory readings, the forces to the east do appear to be weaker. But is it that the Sand Shinobi want to force us back, or are they trying to trap us?" Shisui Uchiha interjected. "If I were the Sand Shinobi commander, I would definitely aim to keep this squad here. Not only as revenge for their fallen comrades but also to make an example for the land of rivers," Shisui added. Kurama Sanayo was startled. "Shisui, do you mean there's a trap to the east?" Shisui shook his head. "I can't be certain." At this point, Minato asked Shishi Hashida, "Shishi, what do you think?" After a moment of thought, Shishi replied, "Sensei, since your sensory abilities can't reach that far, the only way to confirm whether there's a trap is to probe with shadow clones. My chakra reserves are still sufficient. I can create 3 shadow clones, 2 of which can transform into Shisui and Sanayo, and together with your shadow clone, they can head east. As for how we proceed, that decision should be yours." Minato, being a decisive leader, immediately responded, "First, we'll follow Shishi's plan. Second, we'll break through to the south. Although this direction appears to have the strongest enemy presence, it also means that after breaking through, we're less likely to face further strong resistance." Kurama Sanayo couldn't help but ask, "Sensei, what if there isn't a trap to the east?" Minato smiled. "Then we regroup and provide support." Kurama Sanayo nodded. "The enemy is already on the mountain. Move out," Minato ordered. Shishi quickly formed hand seals and created 3 shadow clones. 2 of them transformed into Shisui and Sanayo, and together with Minato's shadow clone, the 4 figures immediately used the body flicker technique to break through to the east. It was clear that the Sand Shinobi had sensory ninjas as well, as they did not change the search directions of the enemy forces in the 4 directions but instead accelerated their approach to the mountaintop. This sign seemed to confirm something. "Move out," Minato commanded once again. The 4 of them exited the cave and began descending the mountain to the south. Minato Namikaze led the way, Kurama Sanayo took the middle, while Shishi Hashida, holding a senbon in his mouth, and Shisui Uchiha covered the rear, one on the left and the other on the right. By the time they reached mid-mountain, the enemy was already within sight. Shishi and Shisui simultaneously accelerated, overtaking Kurama Sanayo, and moved up to a line with Minato, one on each side. As Shisui accelerated, he started forming hand seals and then unleashed a massive fireball, sending a torrent of flames forward. On the left, Shishi performed a symbolic 3-seal sequence, releasing his own great fireball technique. Minato, in the center, completed his hand seals as well, unleashing wind release, great breakthrough. Boom! The fireballs merged into a roaring sea of flames, engulfing the forest ahead. On the other side, 3 Sand Jonin, who were leading the charge, completed their own jutsu all-wind release techniques, forming a terrifying storm that kicked up sand and debris, tearing through the forest. The fire and wind collided, causing the air to violently crash and grind against itself, erupting in a deafening roar. The scorching heatwave that followed swept out in all directions. Both Shishi's team and the Sand Shinobi halted their movements, taking cover behind large trees. As the heatwave subsided, Shishi and the others launched a barrage of shuriken and kunao, their hands moving in unison. Clang, clang. The weapons were either blocked, intercepted by the enemy's own shuriken and kunao, or evaded entirely. This round of projectile attacks achieved nothing. But in that instant, Minato's figure suddenly vanished. He reappeared behind the lead Sand Jonin, grasping a flying thunder god kunao in his left hand while a raised nan formed in his right. Boom! The raised nan struck the Sand Jonin squarely in the back, causing the ground beneath to shatter and collapse. At the same time, Shisui, with his Sharingan activated, employed his unique body flicker technique, creating numerous afterimages that surrounded the other two Sand Jonin in the lead. Following closely behind, Shishi unleashed the Dance of the Crescent Moon, using Shisui's afterimages as cover to break into the battle, targeting one of the Sand Shinobi. Kurama Sanayo, staying back, didn't engage directly but instead used Genjutsu to disrupt the two Sand Shinobi fighting against Shishi and Shisui. Meanwhile, ahead of them, after taking out one Jonin with a raised nan, Minato swiftly retrieved a handful of Flying Thunder God kunao from his tool pouch and flung them in all directions. In the next moment, Minato's figure vanished again, leaving only flashes of yellow light as he darted among the remaining Sand Shinobi. The Sand Shinobi barely had time to register Minato's movements, seeing only a streak of yellow his hair color flashing past. A series of agonized screams shook the resolve of the Sand Shinobi still battling Shishi and Shisui. As the screams ceased, Minato suddenly re-entered the fray, and the two Sand Jonin let out muffled grunts as they were sent flying backward. Seizing the opportunity, Shishi activated a burst of chakra in his feet, and the Totsuka blade in his hand flared with blue flames, lighting up the forest. The Sand Jonin was quick to react, rolling to his feet and raising his kunao to block, but Shishi's Totsuka blade sliced through the kunao, cutting through his flak jacket. The scorching blade slashed diagonally from his right shoulder to his left side, nearly cutting him in half. At the same time, Minato finished off the other Sand Jonin. From the start of the ninjutsu clash to the end of the battle, less than 3 minutes had passed. It wasn't that the Sand Shinobi were weak, it was that Minato's speed was simply too overwhelming. Moreover, Shishi and Shisui possessed extraordinary talents, and with Kurama Sanayo's Genjutsu support, they were able to hold off two Sand Jonin. The best strategy against Shishi and Shisui would have been long-range, wide-area ninjutsu, but unfortunately, the Sand Shinobi lacked sufficient intelligence on them. Once engaged in close combat, the Sand Shinobi had no chance to form seals for ninjutsu, nor did Shishi and Shisui give them any opportunity to retreat or escape. With the battle concluded, Shishi and the others quickly collected the Flying Thunder God kunao and continued southward. The Sand Shinobi from the north and west were closing in, with the western group especially close. Chapter 62, Pakara. They descended the mountain and crossed the river. At that moment, the memories from the shadow clones returned, and Shishi Hashida immediately reported, "Minato-sensei, there's indeed a trap to the east. It's Cho, the puppet master." Minato Namikaze's eyes narrowed as he heard this, and he immediately halted, saying, "Follow the river south." The four of them quickly changed direction, abandoning their plan to circle around to the east. As they followed the river downstream, Kurama Sanayo couldn't help but ask, "Minato-sensei, is this Cho really that formidable?" Minato nodded slightly. "She's an outstanding female puppet master from the Sand Village. Moreover, she's skilled in medical ninjutsu and the use of poisons. During the last great ninja war, she caused a lot of trouble for our village. Fortunately, we had Lady Tsunade, who was able to counter her poison techniques. Puppet masters, especially powerful ones, are notoriously difficult to deal with. And Cho was among the best. It's said she possesses the legendary 10 puppets created by Monzaemon, the strongest puppet master in the Sand Village's history. Monzaemon was a remarkable ninja from the era of the first and second Hokage and was the one who pioneered the path of puppet ninjutsu." Hearing Minato's explanation, both Kurama Sanayo and Shisui Uchiha were taken aback. Shishi Hashida also knew a bit about Cho. She was a formidable and ruthless opponent. If they were to encounter her along with other Sand Shinobi, without using the Flying Thunder God technique to escape, Shishi believed that aside from Minato, the rest of them would be in serious trouble. Minato's decision to change plans was undoubtedly the right one. The four of them continued south along the river, eventually entering a town called Tsu. They used the town's complexity to cover their tracks. Shishi and Shisui transformed into wildcats and exited the town, heading north into the forest, while Minato used the Flying Thunder God technique to teleport himself and Sanayo to their location. This strategy completely threw off the sand shinobi, who had followed them to Tsu but were left clueless, losing the trail of Minato's team. In the mountains, Shishi Hashida and his team found a cave where they could temporarily settle down. Meanwhile, back at the battlefield on the mountainside, Cho arrived with several sand shinobi, silently observing the grim scene. 3 Jainin and 12 Chunin had been slaughtered in just a few minutes. That guy with the yellow hair. Thinking about Minato Namikaze's incredible instant movement technique, Chiyo's expression grew even more serious. This sword wound, it must have been made by that kid with the short sword. A genius from Konoha. Cho examined each corpse, piecing together bits of information. Finally, Cho turned to one of the sand Jainin and said, "Raza, cancel the pursuit of Minato Namikaze and his team." Raza frowned upon hearing this. "Lady Cho, the destructive power of this Konoha team is immense. If we don't eliminate them, they'll pose a significant threat." Cho responded, "I'm well aware of that. But you've seen it too. How many ninjas would we need to surround and eliminate them? We can't afford a full-scale battle. So, cancel the previous plan and organize Jainin squads to pursue them. Even if we can't take them out, we must at least force them out of our territory." Raza nodded in agreement, as he had been considering the same approach. Cho then added, "I'll leave this pursuit mission to you. The White Fang of Konoha has appeared in the Land of Rivers, so I need to head there." Raza acknowledged the order and immediately turned to leave. Nightfall descended. Shishi Hashida's shadow clone, disguised as a stray cat, reappeared in Tsu town. Under the moonlight and street lamps, it wandered through the crowd, leaping between buildings. What puzzled Shishi, however, was the absence of any sand shinobi in the town. They had disappeared during the day, but so many sand shinobi had been pursuing them. Had they really given up so quickly? "Hey!" Just as he was about to rendezvous with Shisui, Shishi suddenly stopped, his gaze fixed on a figure in the street. "Is that Pakura?" Her figure and aura were simply too striking. At that moment, as if noticing Shishi's gaze, the curvaceous figure on the street turned to look at him. Shishi nonchalantly meowed, then strutted into a dark alley. Back on the street, Pakura withdrew her gaze and continued following the trail left by the Konoha ninjas that the sand shinobi had been tracking earlier in the day. She eventually arrived at an abandoned house. The Konoha ninjas' trail had ended in this dilapidated building. Frowning, Pakura carefully examined the area under the dim light but found nothing. The trail had been wiped clean. Exiting the house, Pakura scanned the surroundings again and eventually climbed onto the roof, surveying the area. Suddenly, her gaze locked onto a dirty stray cat. Stray cats were common, but at that moment, Pakura recalled the stray cat she had briefly made eye contact with earlier on the street. Swish! Pakura's figure disappeared from the rooftop and reappeared beside a few paw prints. These were the same paw prints she had noticed earlier, seemingly ordinary. But now, her instincts told her something was off. She immediately formed hand signs, creating 6 clones, each heading in a different direction to follow the various paw print trails. Before long, Pakura returned to the room where Minato Namikaze and his team had last been. She carefully examined the area again. There were no cat paw prints, but she did find traces of something being deliberately erased. "As I thought, there's something suspicious here. The paw prints started from this spot, but someone tried to cover them up." A smile spread across Pakura's face as she mused, "Why are there only 2 sets of cat prints? That Minato Namikaze's instant movement technique, could it possibly be more than just short-range teleportation?" Pakura's eyes widened in surprise, and she quickly darted away. Moments later, Pakura returned, accompanied by Raza and 5 other Jainin. Among them, Raza and Pakura were the youngest. After hearing Pakura's analysis, Raza and the others surveyed the area once more. When they regrouped, a middle-aged Jainin said, "Pakura's theory is highly plausible. A teleportation technique that works over long distances. This could be a space-time ninjutsu." Raza's gaze shifted northward. The darkness obscured his view, but he knew there was a mountain in that direction. Judging by the traces, it was highly likely that the Konoha team was hiding there. But there was also a chance they had already left. "Then let's move out. We can't keep lingering here. The current situation in the Land of Rivers is becoming increasingly unfavorable for us," Raza declared. The others nodded in agreement, and in unison, they vanished using the body flicker technique. Inside the cave, Shishi Hashida and Shisui Uchiha dispelled their shadow clones. After receiving the memories, Shisui reported, "Minato-sensei, the sand shinobi who were tracking us have all withdrawn, but new ones have arrived. The exact number is unclear, but given the situation, it's highly likely they're an elite Jainin squad. He had gathered this information by hypnotizing people in the town. By piecing together details from multiple sources, he couldn't determine how many sand shinobi had come, but the shift in their forces provided some clues. Minato Namikaze nodded and then looked at Shishi. Shishi, however, furrowed his brows slightly and after a moment of contemplation said, "Minato-sensei, I think we might have been exposed." An amazed Sani asked, "Shishi, was your transformation technique discovered?" Shishi shook his head. "I'm not sure, it's just a gut feeling." Minato smiled and said, "A ninja's intuition is often very accurate. At this point, it's likely the sand shinobi have changed their strategy, opting to use a small, elite force against us. And it seems this elite unit has already figured out that we're likely hiding here." Shisui added, "If that's the case, Minato-sensei, there's also a chance they've discovered the secret of your instant movement technique." Minato, unconcerned, replied, "Once a jutsu is used, it's inevitable that someone will gather intelligence on it. It's just a matter of time, nothing to worry about." Kurama-sani muttered, "An elite squad, sounds like we're in big trouble, hey?" Shishi grinned, "We've caused the sand shinobi so much trouble, it's only fair they come looking to return the favor." His words immediately lightened the mood. Minato then said, "Shishi, send out a shadow clone to scout the area with me. The rest of you head north." "Understood." Leaving behind a shadow clone, Shishi Hashida, Shisui Uchiha, and Kurama-sani began their retreat together. Meanwhile, on the other side, Minato Namikaze and Shishi's shadow clone encountered a sand shinobi squad halfway up the mountain. 2 Kekii Genkai users. Minato's heart tightened when he saw Raza and Pakura. The hidden sand village collected information on talented ninjas from other villages, and Konoha was no exception. Kekii Genkai users were especially notable, particularly those without a family lineage. Raza was slightly older, already 20 years old, while the voluptuous and seemingly mature Pakura was around Minato's age, despite her appearance. It looks like this mission might end here. In an instant, Minato made a decision, quietly briefing Shishi on Raza and Pakura. One controlled magnet release, the other scorch release. Both were young and powerful Jainin. Raza, Pakura, and their team were equally on high alert, especially when they saw that there were only 2 opponents. The recent achievements of Minato's team had been too remarkable for them not to be cautious. Minato Namikaze of Konoha. Raza spoke first, his gaze fixed on Minato before shifting to Shishi. His eyes locked onto the hilt of a blade peeking out from Shishi's side. "For someone your age to kill a Jainin, that's truly impressive. Even though you're an enemy, you've earned our respect." "I am Raza, a Jainin of the Hidden Sand Village." Shishi responded, Shishi Hashida, Chunin of Konoha. Raza, staring at Shishi's youthful face, declared, "I will use all my strength to kill you. That is my way of showing respect." Shishi smiled, "Right now, I'm not your match, but in 10 years, you won't be mine. And in the future, neither your son nor your daughter will be a match for me." This statement left both Minato and the Sand Shinobis, including Raza, momentarily stunned. Shishi's perspective, really is odd but amusing, Minato thought with a smile, his hand already grasping a flying thunder god kunai. Raza, snapping out of his surprise, darkened his expression. "You have no future." But Pakura had already grown impatient. Raising her hands, 2 fiery red spheres appeared in her palms. "Let's take them down first." With that, she launched one of the fireballs straight at Shishi. "She's fiery, I'll write attacks without hesitation." Shishi muttered, quickly forming a few hand seals. He unleashed a stream of fire from his mouth, which rapidly gathered into a large fireball to meet Pakura's. Boom! The 2 fireballs collided and exploded, sending waves of fire outward. Pakura's scorch release fireball continued its trajectory toward Shishi. Shishi swiftly dodged, using his agility and quick reflexes to evade the attacks. Seeing this, Pakura launched a second scorch release fireball toward him. At that moment, Minato's kunai flew toward Pakura. Simultaneously, Minato vanished, reappearing in front of the scorch release fireball with a raised nan in hand, which he slammed into the fireball. Boom! The scorch release fireball exploded. Pakura easily dodged the kunai, while Raza clenched his fist. "I've got you now." Iron sand began to creep up from the ground beneath Minato. Raza had anticipated Minato's movements and seized the opportunity. However, just as he was about to ensnare Minato with the iron sand, Minato vanished from his spot. "Watch out!" A warning shout rang out from behind Pakura. Minato reappeared behind her, grasping his flying thunder god kunao. As he did, he reached into his pouch and scattered a flurry of kunao around. Raza quickly turned, his pupils dilating. "Those kunao, they've got teleportation formulas on them." The previous intelligence gathered on Minato had not mentioned anything about the kunao bearing teleportation markings. Those who had known this information were already dead. Just as the sand shinobi who knew Shishi didn't need hand seals to use fire release were also dead. "Be careful! Those kunao have teleportation formulas!" Raza shouted, and his iron sand shot out densely to intercept Minato's attack on Pakura. However, both the warning and the iron sand were too late. Minato once again disappeared and reappeared behind a middle-aged sand Jainin, a raised nan forming in his hand. The middle-aged sand Jainin was on guard, turning to block with his sword. In the next instant, the raised nan met the sword, and with a powerful push from Minato, the blade shattered, and the raised nan slammed into the sand Jainin, sending him flying. Raza's iron sand, Pakura's scorch release fireballs, and the other attacks all arrived, but they hit nothing. But Raza had already hidden iron sand beneath each of the flying thunder god kunao, ready to strike whenever Minato reappeared. However, they still missed. His speed, it's unbelievable. He's like a yellow flash. Raza's face grew solemn. Minato flashed several more times, finally appearing beside Shishi, where he used a raised nan to shatter Pakura's scorch release fireball, dispersing it completely. Raza's attacks had consistently been a step behind, despite his early preparations. The first round of battle ended. Shishi and Minato were unscathed, while one sand shinobi lay gravely injured and unconscious or maybe dead by now. End of chapter. Next, the Yellow Flash. Chapter 63, The Yellow Flash. After a brief exchange, the two sides once again faced off. Raza stared at Minato Namikaze, his mind racing as he tried to figure out how to catch or strike Minato. The only way is to attack his blind spot when he initiates an attack. Or to have a reaction speed faster than his. Raza pondered, but inwardly frowned. Impossible. There's no way to catch him. He then shifted his gaze to Shishi Hashida. If he couldn't directly target Minato Namikaze, then he would start with his subordinate. Pakura, Made, focus all your efforts on that kid. Raza commanded. Pakura and the others immediately understood Shishi Hashida was to be the weak point they would exploit to break through Minato Namikaze. No one found it dishonorable to gang up on a smaller opponent, they all nodded in agreement. On the other side, Shishi Hashida keenly sensed Raza and his team's focus on him. In a low voice, he called out, "Minato-sensei." With his wealth of experience, Minato Namikaze had already sensed their intentions and caught the meaning in Shishi's words. Use it to our advantage. Wait. After all, it was only a shadow clone. At this moment, two sand jonin began retreating from the battlefield, taking with them the heavily injured jonin that Minato had struck down earlier, moving away from the area covered by Minato's flying thunder god kunao. Shishi Hashida glanced over and grew more alert. He didn't believe those two sand jonin would just sit back and watch the rest of the battle. At that moment, Made, the jonin who had been standing behind Raza and Pakura, suddenly moved. He rushed forward, kunao in hand. Raza and Pakura also sprang into action. Raza manipulated his iron sand, forming a dense barrage of senbon that rained down. Meanwhile, Pakura's scorch release fireballs circled around from both sides, aiming for the rear of Shishi and Minato. Shishi took in the entire situation, his hands swiftly forming seals. With just two hand signs, he unleashed a fire stream from his mouth, which quickly expanded into a massive dragon-shaped flame. Fire release, dragon fire technique. The dragon-shaped flame engulfed the incoming iron sand senbon, melting them into droplets of molten iron that fell to the ground. As the flames dispersed, the sound of whistling shuriken filled the air. Made was charging in with a flurry of shuriken. Minato Namikaze raised his hand and threw his own shuriken with pinpoint accuracy, intercepting Made's attack. Just then, Pakura's scorch release fireballs came at them from behind. Both Shishi and Minato dodged in unison. Raza raised his hand, sending a wave of iron sand surging toward Minato, unleashing a relentless series of attacks. At that moment, Shishi no longer had time to observe Minato's side of the battle. He was now engaged in a fierce fight with Made, the Sand Jonin, while also dealing with 2 more scorch release fireballs. He was being pushed back step by step. The middle-aged Jonin, Made, was already formidable on his own, and with the added power of the scorch release, Shishi Hashida could only keep up thanks to his heightened reflexes and intense focus. However, what troubled him the most were those scorch release fireballs. Even if he sliced them apart with his blue flame sky blade, they would recombine, making it more effective to just smash them apart with a raise nan. Suddenly, Made retreated and began forming hand seals, and the frequency of the scorch release fireball attacks increased, leaving Shishi Hashida no time to think of anything else. Though Shishi could also use the raise nan, he chose not to. Sure enough, Made finished his seals, took a deep breath, and unleashed a violent windstorm. But this jutsu wasn't just aimed at Shishi, it targeted everyone on the battlefield, including Raza and Pakura, covering the entire area and even the flying thunder god Kunao scattered across the field. In the midst of playing cat and mouse with Raza, Minato Namikaze suddenly appeared beside Shishi. Before the storm could engulf them, the two vanished again. Raza, now protected by a shield of iron sand, stared intently at the flickering yellow light. Good, he hasn't retreated. Raza smiled. Pakura dispersed her scorch release fireballs, forming a ring of fire around herself as a protective barrier. Outside the battlefield, the 2 Jonin tending to the wounded began forming hand seals at the same time. Wind release, great cast net. One after the other, the 2 of them unleashed the same jutsu, creating a massive, razor-sharp web of wind that swept across the entire battlefield just as Made's wind release started to wane, resulting in a relentless, continuous attack. Raza, with only his eyes exposed, looked out at the battlefield now shrouded in the raging winds and thought, in this situation, if you don't want to die, escape is the only option. If Minato Namikaze fled, it would indeed be a shame, but it would also provide crucial information about his teleportation technique. Additionally, it would clarify whether Minato's technique was merely high-speed movement or true space-time ninjutsu. However, Minato Namikaze silently reappeared behind the 2 Jonin who had just unleashed their wind-release jutsu, with Shishi Hashida by his side. At that moment, both experienced Sand Jonin sensed something was wrong. Sweat formed on their foreheads as they abruptly halted their jutsu and twisted their necks to look back. Minato's raise nan came crashing down, while Shishi was even more direct, slicing down with his Totsuka blade. Splurt! Boom! The ground split, and the bodies were cleaved in 2. Without uttering a sound, the 2 Sand Jonin were killed by Shishi Hashida and Minato Namikaze. Made, standing outside the storm's reach, turned his head and widened his eyes in disbelief at the scene before him. How is this possible? As the storm subsided, Raza and Pakura dispelled their defenses and turned to look at the rising dust cloud. Their expressions were grim, filled with disbelief. This guy can place a marking on people. Raza reacted quickly, instantly realizing what had happened, feeling so frustrated that he nearly coughed up blood. 2 encounters, and they had already lost 3 men. Just then, with a poof, Shishi Hashida dispersed into a cloud of smoke. A shadow clone! Made couldn't help but exclaim. Which meant that Minato Namikaze never really needed to rescue Shishi in the first place. The only reason he did so was to trick them into continuing with their plan. Their entire strategy had been completely seen through and exploited due to a lack of information. Tsunagakuer shouldn't provoke Konoha. I hope you relay that message to the 3rd Kazekage. With those words, Minato Namikaze vanished. The battlefield fell into silence. After a long pause, Raza looked up at the moon hanging in the sky and said, Pakura, destroy all those kunao with the markings. Pakura nodded silently and sent out her scorch release fireballs, melting each of the kunao. As for the idea of taking the kunao back for research, they didn't even consider it. No one dared to touch the kunao marked with Minato's jutsu. The memories from his shadow clone returned, and Shishi Hashida and his group immediately stopped moving. Sure enough, Minato Namikaze appeared shortly after. Let's rest for half an hour before we continue, Minato said. Kurama-sani let out a sigh of relief and smiled, looks like we won't have any pursuers. Minato smiled, that may be true, but we should still stay vigilant. Shishi, on the other hand, was deep in thought. After this battle, the name Yellow Flash is probably going to start spreading throughout the ninja world. The road to glory is paved with countless bones. In the ninja world, any renowned title is built upon a pile of corpses. The Yellow Flash, the White Fang of Konoha, and even the Killer Bee of the Cloud Village. Shishi cleared his mind and said, "It's been a long time since I've had a good meal. I'll go hunt something for us." Minato nodded but added, "Shisui, go with Shishi." After a meal of roasted rabbit, the four set off again, reaching the border between the Land of Fire and the Land of Rivers by dawn. They then continued southeast along the border, eventually circling around from the north to return to Hagu town. Konoha ninjas were stationed there, and it had even become the rear base for Konoha's operations against the Land of Rivers. To Shishi's surprise, he spotted Kakashi there. "Kakashi, when did you get here?" Shishi asked after greeting him. "Last night," Kakashi replied, then added, "The village is still sending reinforcements, so it seems the situation at the front isn't going well." Shishi chuckled, "No, I didn't come from the village, I'm returning from the front lines." Kakashi was stunned. At that moment, Kurama-san's voice called out, and Shishi Hashida patted Kakashi on the shoulder. "I'm off. If you head to the front lines, be extra careful, especially with Sand Ninja's puppet masters." With that, Shishi quickly left and rejoined Minato Namikaze and the others as they set off again, arriving at the Konoha Sand front lines by midday. The commander here was Sakumo Hatake. Seeing the four of them, Sakumo smiled and said, "Minato, we're lucky to have you all." Minato responded humbly, "You're too kind, sir. We were just doing our duty." Sakumo, knowing Minato's gentle and modest nature, smiled and then turned his gaze to Shishi Hashida. "Shishi, thank you for guiding Kakashi." Shishi was momentarily taken aback and quickly replied, "You give me too much credit, sir. Kakashi has helped me a lot as well. It's more of an exchange between friends than guidance." Sakumo's admiration for Shishi grew, and he said, "If you ever need help with swordsmanship, feel free to come to me anytime." Shishi was overjoyed and quickly bowed in gratitude. "Thank you, sir. I will." This was not the time for modesty. Minato Namikaze then went off to attend a Jonin meeting and exchange information. Shishi and the others waited for nearly an hour before seeing Minato again. "We'll have to split up now," Minato's first words startled the three of them. "Shisui, you three will escort the injured back to Hagu town. Once you arrive, Shishi, you'll stay there and join the medical team." Minato then looked at Uchiha Shisui and Kurama-san. "As for you two, you'll temporarily join other teams until the mission is completed." Shishi immediately understood Minato was about to engage with powerful sand ninjas, and it wasn't suitable to bring them along. Kurama-san breathed a sigh of relief and joked, "I was worried you wouldn't be our squad leader anymore, Minato-sensei." Minato patted Sani's shoulder and advised, "Be careful during the mission." "Don't worry, Minato-sensei, we will," Sani assured him, thumping his chest. After that, Shishi and the others escorted a group of injured ninjas back to Hagu town. There wasn't much time to talk as Uchiha Shisui and Kurama-san were quickly called away by a middle-aged ninja. Meanwhile, Shishi dove into his duties as a medical ninja, barely having a moment to rest. Injured ninjas were continuously brought in from the front lines, while those who had recovered in Hagu town were sent back to the front. Shishi gradually got to know more Konoha ninjas, and his exceptional medical skills earned him the respect of many, especially after word spread that he had trained under Tsunade. Over time, this rumor evolved into him being called the disciple of Tsunade, one of the legendary Sunin. To this, Shishi neither denied nor confirmed the rumors. After all, he had trained under Tsunade. If others misunderstood, that wasn't his fault. End of chapter. Next time, new master tags. Chapter 64, New Master Tag again. Half a month quickly passed. In Hagu town, fewer and fewer injured were arriving from the front lines, giving Shishi Hashida a lot more free time. In a forest near the medical camp, Shishi's chakra erupted beneath his feet, propelling him forward at high speed, leaving after images in his wake. Where he had just stood, a charred crater now remained. The most basic body flicker technique essentially relies on a burst of chakra from the feet to achieve high-speed movement. Tsunade's superhuman strength, on the other hand, comes from even more precise chakra control, allowing for greater bursts of power. Now, Shishi had taken it a step further by using fire release chakra, transforming a pure chakra burst into one with the nature of fire release, creating an even more powerful propulsion. The explosive nature of fire release was indeed effective, though it caused quite a commotion. After several days of continuous practice, Shishi had finally mastered this explosive technique. This was no ordinary body flicker, it was the fire body flicker technique. Unfortunately, it hadn't yet reached the level of an A-rank skill on his tag tree. Nor had it met Shishi's goal. He wasn't just after speed in movement, he needed speed in attack as well. While improving movement speed naturally boosts attack speed, it still wasn't enough. Coming to a halt, Shishi fell into deep thought once more. Countless ideas from both his past and present lives surfaced in his mind. Jet propulsion. Turbojet. Do I need wind release? No, maybe I should incorporate further shape transformation. If I want to boost speed across the board, it can't just be about foot bursts, there's really only one way to achieve that, a chakra cloak. Shishi scratched his head in frustration. But forming a chakra cloak requires an extraordinary level of chakra control, not to mention the amount of chakra I currently have is nowhere near enough. The yin seal is clearly indispensable. Also, would it be more efficient to develop a fire release chakra cloak instead of continuing with lightning release training? He exhaled deeply, abandoning the idea of training in lightning release. When developing a new technique, the worst thing you can do is give up at the first sign of difficulty. Stepping over to a tree, Shishi sat down cross-legged beneath it, organizing his thoughts. He pondered, first is chakra control. My current level isn't enough, but if I can acquire the medical expert tag, my chakra control will immediately improve. And as for chakra reserves, there's the yin seal. One on the forehead and another on the abdomen. If I fill both seals to capacity, I won't be as strong as a tailed beast, but I'll be close enough to act like one. The most crucial part is, if I succeed in developing this technique, it will undoubtedly be S rank. Not only will I earn the Fire Release Master tag, but it will also advance my development of Fire Release sword techniques, leading to the Swordsmanship Master tag. That would further enhance my physical abilities. The benefits were numerous, and after weighing them carefully, Shishi made up his mind. Fire Release it is. I'll start with shape transformation. With that, Shishi began his new training regimen. He had previously pushed his chakra nature transformation to its limits. To achieve an even more powerful burst of energy, he needed to focus on shape transformation. Boom! Bang! In the forest, Shishi Hashida repeatedly unleashed bursts of chakra beneath his feet. But this time, it was different. He was experimenting with shape transformation. For example, he tried to shape the fire release chakra under his feet into a trumpet-like form before releasing it. Several days quickly passed. On the last day of April, while Shishi was training, he suddenly heard a familiar voice calling his name. He turned around to see Minato Namikaze, Shisui Uchiha, and Sani Kurama approaching him with smiles on their faces. Is the mission over? Shishi asked with surprise. But then he noticed the bandages on Sani Kurama's arm. Sani, you're injured. It's nothing, just a flesh wound, Sani replied nonchalantly. Shishi stepped forward to inspect the injury and, satisfied that it wasn't serious, nodded in relief. At this point, Minato Namikaze spoke up, Shishi, you're officially rejoining the team now. We'll be heading back to Konoha. On May 1st, in the 40th year of Konoha, Shishi and the others returned to the village. While Minato and the rest were enjoying some well-deserved time off, Shishi dove straight into work at Konoha Hospital. He urgently needed the medical expert tag to enhance his chakra control. Of course, he didn't neglect his training in wind release chakra nature transformation, sealing techniques, or fire release shape transformation. His schedule was packed, even busier than when he was on missions. One day, after finishing lunch, Shishi headed from Konoha Hospital to seek advice from Minato on sealing techniques. However, when he knocked on the door, it wasn't Minato who answered but a woman with red hair, Kushina Uzumaki. Shishi was momentarily taken aback, but Kushina smiled warmly and said, You must be Shishi, the one Minato's told me about, right? I'm Kushina Uzumaki, Minato's girlfriend, she added confidently. At that moment, Minato Namikaze's voice called out, Is that you, Shishi? Come on in. Kushina Uzumaki quickly added, Come in, we were just working on some sealing techniques. Shishi, no longer needing to pretend, immediately bowed respectfully and said, Sensei's wife, I'm Shishi Hashida. Please take care of me. Hearing herself called Sensei's wife made Kushina blush, but she smiled even more brightly. She grabbed Shishi's hand and led him inside. In the living room, Shishi saw numerous scrolls scattered around, all covered in densely packed sealing formulas. Minato looked up as Shishi entered and smiled, Shishi, come over here. Kushina and I have made some preliminary designs based on your earlier ideas. Shishi hurried over and examined the sealing formulas on the scrolls. Though the notes were a bit rough, the thought process was very clear, with two distinct handwriting styles, clearly a collaboration between Minato and Kushina. After a close look, Shishi exclaimed with delight, "Sensei, Kushina-san, you're amazing." Kushina immediately beamed with pride, "Of course." But then she added with a smile, "And Shishi, you're very impressive too, coming up with the idea of combining two four-symbol seals." Minato nodded and said, "Shishi, this can be considered a new sealing technique." Pretending to think for a moment, Shishi suggested, "How about we call it the 8-trigram seal?" Kushina instantly gave him a thumbs up, "That's a perfect name." Minato agreed, "Then it'll be called the 8-trigram seal." "There's one more thing. The village might find this sealing technique useful, so we need to get your consent," Minato continued. "Of course, the village will compensate you. Based on the evaluation, the 8-trigram seal qualifies as an A-rank technique, so you can choose an A-rank jutsu from the village's archive, sealing techniques included." Shishi had already guessed what the 8-trigram seal might be used for, and besides, he had only proposed the concept. Minato and Kushina were the ones who brought it to life. Still, he wasn't about to turn down what he was owed, so he agreed without hesitation. As for which A-rank jutsu to choose, he decided to take some time to think it over. Just then, he noticed some activity in the tag tree within his mind. However, he didn't check it right away. Instead, he continued learning about the 8-trigram seal and the more complex combination of the yin seal and the 8-trigram seal alongside Minato and Kushina. Although the combination of the two sealing techniques was intricate, Shishi, who had already mastered the yin seal and the four-symbol seal, didn't find it overly difficult to learn. This was partly due to his natural talent for sealing techniques, but also thanks to his strong memory, high-level cognitive abilities, and intense focus, all boosted by his special system. Kushina couldn't help but praise him repeatedly, growing even more fond of the lovely, sweet-talking Shishi. Minato Namikaze's 3-day vacation flew by, and by the end of it, Shishi Hashida had almost fully mastered the new sealing technique. On the last day of the break, as they were about to leave, Kushina Uzumaki offered with a smile, "Shishi, if you ever have any questions about sealing techniques, feel free to come to me." Shishi was pleasantly surprised but didn't immediately agree. Instead, he looked toward Minato. It wasn't that he doubted Minato's approval, rather, he knew about Kushina's true identity but had to pretend he didn't. Therefore, he looked to Minato for confirmation. Minato, noticing Shishi's reaction, smiled and said, "Of course, if you need any help, you can always go to her." Shishi's face lit up with joy. "Thank you, Minato-sensei." "Thank you, Kushina-sensei." As they were seeing him off, Minato asked, "Have you decided on the A-rank jutsu yet?" Shishi thought for a moment and then asked, "Do you have any recommendations, sensei?" Minato smiled, "It might be best to pick a jutsu that I haven't mastered yet. For example, something in wind release, sensory ninjutsu, or sealing techniques." Shishi grinned, "That was my thought as well." "In that case," Shishi suggested, "how about choosing a genjutsu?" "Genjutsu?" Minato was a bit surprised. Shishi nodded. "I've learned a lot about genjutsu from Shisui and Sani. I've grown very interested in it. More importantly, Minato-sensei, I think the memory palace we discussed earlier would be perfect as a genjutsu." "Genjutsu, hey?" Minato pondered for a moment and then praised, "Shishi, your intuition with jutsu is as sharp as ever. All right then, a genjutsu it is." With that decision made, Shishi returned home under the cover of night. After preparing a bath, Shishi closed his eyes and turned his attention to the tag tree in his mind. A new tag had appeared. Tag, Sealing Master. Conditions to obtain: create at least 5 A-rank sealing techniques or create 1 S-rank sealing technique. Effects: sealing jutsu and curse mark aptitude increase by 100%, thought processing speed increases by 100%, and 1 sealing technique can be converted into a Kekki Genkai/bloodline limit. No learning barriers exist for non-bloodline sealing techniques or curse marks. Shishi's eyes shot open as he stood up abruptly. To convert a sealing technique into a Kekki Genkai. Incredible. No wonder it's called a master tag. It's both powerful and sturdy. Shishi couldn't help but grin widely. He knew very well that the world of Naruto revolved around bloodlines and overpowered abilities. Either you had a powerful bloodline or a game-breaking ability, otherwise, even someone like Orochimaru, a genius scientist, would end up sidelined. End of chapter. Next, Flower of Flames. Next, S-rank confidential mission. Next, maybe explanation for Raza Iron Sand? Chapter 65, Flower of Flames. After lying back down, Shishi Hashida calmed himself. The Sealing Master tag was much more challenging to achieve than either Fire Release Master or Swordsmanship Master. Developing sealing techniques was significantly more difficult. Finally, as Shishi considered the last effect of the Sealing Master tag, a thought crossed his mind: isn't adamant sealing chains considered a Kekii Genkai? I remember it being a hidden technique. But adamant sealing chains is heavily tied to the Uzumaki clan's unique physiology, so it should still fall under the category of a Kekii Genkai. Shishi shook his head, dismissing the idea. While adamant sealing chains was indeed powerful, it would be more appropriate to turn a sealing technique of his own creation into a Kekii Genkai if he ever obtained the Sealing Master tag. I could even develop a sealing technique specifically with the goal of becoming a Kekii Genkai in mind. As the water cooled, Shishi finished his bath and then went to his study to review his sealing technique knowledge. Revisiting old knowledge brings new insights. The next day, after returning from his morning training, Shishi noticed a scroll and a note left on the table. Upon closer inspection, he found they were from Minato Namikaze. Opening the scroll, a jutsu was revealed. Infinite Darkness Jutsu. It was a visual genjutsu that could rob the enemy of their sight. Undoubtedly, this was an excellent technique for countering dojutsu users. Sealing the scroll inside the sealing scroll given to him by Tenka, Shishi washed up and headed to Konoha Hospital. In the following days, Shishi's study of sealing techniques shifted from Minato to Kushina Uzumaki, with their sessions taking place at Minato's home. Time flew by, and July arrived, marking the start of the annual Chunin exams. Upon learning that Kakashi was participating, Shishi made a point to watch during the second and third rounds. As expected, Kakashi successfully advanced to Chunin, becoming Konoha's second genius to achieve this rank at the age of 6. His birthday was in September, so he was still 6 years old. After Kakashi's promotion, Shishi suggested a celebration, but Kakashi proposed, "How about we have an all-out competition instead?" Shishi raised an eyebrow and agreed with a smile, "Today, you get to decide." Kakashi then said, "For the first round, let's race from here to the training grounds and see who arrives first." Might Guy immediately chimed in, "How could I miss out on such a passionate challenge?" Nohara Rin and the others, who were also waiting for the results, gathered around as well. "Count me in!" shouted Obito Uchiha, unwilling to be left out. Seeing Asuma Sarutobi also eager to join, Shishi said, "Since everyone wants to join, let's all race together." Shizune and the other girls quickly voiced their agreement. Soon, everyone was lined up, and at Shishi's command, they all used the body flicker technique, racing towards the training grounds at full speed. In no time, the group had formed different tiers. In the lead, neck and neck, were Shishi, Kakashi, and Asuma. The second tier consisted of Might Guy and Obito Uchiha. The third tier included Shizune, Kurane Yui, Rin Nohara, and the other girls. However, as Shishi employed his newly developed fire body flicker technique, he immediately widened the gap between himself, Kakashi, and Asuma. But then, Shishi heard the crackling sound of electricity behind him. He turned his head to see Kakashi surrounded by crackling lightning, his speed suddenly increasing. He's already started applying lightning release chakra nature transformation to his body. "Impressive, Kakashi!" Shishi Hashida silently praised. Meanwhile, Asuma Sarutobi gritted his teeth as he watched the two in front of him. "Damn it, I can't catch up." He resolved to ask his older brother, Shinosuke Sarutobi, for advice when he got back. The winner of the first round was undoubtedly Shishi Hashida. Kakashi's application of lightning release chakra nature transformation was still in its early stages. For the second round, by the river, Shishi and Kakashi collided at high speed under the watchful eyes of the others. Their fists and feet clashed, kunao sparked as they met in combat. Both fought with incredible speed, leaving only after images in their wake that Shizune and the others struggled to keep up with. "So fast!" Kurane Yui exclaimed in surprise. Suddenly, Shishi disarmed Kakashi, knocking the kunao out of his hand. But Kakashi quickly drew his sword, forcing Shishi to abandon his kunao as well. In response, Shishi drew his Totsuka blade. Short sword against short sword. The sound of clashing metal rang out as sparks flew between them. But soon, Might Guy and Asuma noticed that Kakashi was starting to lose ground. Kakashi suddenly retreated, performing several backflips before sheathing his sword and rapidly forming hand seals. Lightning release? Shishi quickly formed 2 symbolic hand seals and unleashed a great fireball jutsu, interrupting Kakashi's jutsu and forcing him to dodge. Uchiha Obito, watching from the sidelines, widened his eyes in disbelief. 2 hand seals for the great fireball jutsu? This is the first time I've seen that. Shishi followed up by throwing a barrage of shuriken, forcing Kakashi to keep dodging. Despite this, Kakashi managed to complete his hand seals. Lightning release, ground pulse. Electricity raced across the ground toward Shishi. Shishi leapt into the air and countered with a dragon fire jutsu, blasting the advancing electricity away. Before he even landed, he unleashed another jutsu Phoenix Sage fire technique combined with a flurry of shuriken that merged with the fireballs. Phoenix Sage Flower Nail Crimson. Fire Style, Phoenix Flower Jutsu Scarlet Claw. Kakashi immediately dodged and weaved to avoid the attack. As Shishi landed, he formed 2 more hand seals. Fire Style, Biscuit Firing Jutsu. Suddenly, Kakashi's body was engulfed in flames, forcing him to dive into the river to extinguish them. Shishi charged toward the water. The moment Kakashi resurfaced, he felt a kunai pressed against his neck. But in the next instant, with a puff of smoke, Kakashi's body turned into a cloud of vapor. Behind Shishi, the real Kakashi emerged from the river, having completed his jutsu. Lightning release, ground pulse. Lightning crackled and surged toward Shishi from behind, forming a tree-like pattern of electricity. Boom! The river surface exploded, sending waves crashing and spraying water vapor, while Shishi Hashira had already vanished without a trace. That's fast! Kakashi's gaze sharpened as the mist parted to reveal 3 after-images of Shishi charging toward him. It was the dance of the crescent moon. There was no time to form hand seals. On the riverbank, under the watchful eyes of Shizune and the others, Kakashi was forced into retreat by the 3 Shishi Hashitas, eventually having no choice but to surrender. In terms of speed, physical skills, swordsmanship, and ninjutsu, Kakashi was at a clear disadvantage. The fight left Shizune and the others thoroughly impressed. It was a different level compared to the practice fights back at the academy. This is what it means to be a Chunin, the difference is enormous, Kurenai marveled. Shizune and Rin nodded in agreement. Afterward, Might Guy, Obito Uchiha, and Asuma Sarutobi all took turns sparring with Shishi and Kakashi, experiencing firsthand the strength of Chunin. As the sun set, everyone went their separate ways, and Shishi Hashira accompanied Shizune home. When they passed by a flower shop, Shizune stopped and said, "Lady Tsunade's flowers need replacing. How about we get some now?" "Let's go take a look," Shishi agreed. He followed Shizune into the flower shop. Inside, the shop owner was watering some wilting flowers. Shishi looked at the blooming petals but suddenly froze in place. Shizune selected some flowers and, noticing Shishi's reaction, asked, "Shishi, do you like morning glories?" Shishi snapped back to reality, smiling and nodding, "Yes, I do. This should be my lucky flower." Shizune said, taking note. "Then let's buy it," Shishi said, and he purchased the flowers, including the ones Shizune picked. After escorting Shizune home, Shishi hurried back to his own place, found a vase, and placed the flowers inside. He had mentioned that the morning glories were his lucky flower because their blooming appearance reminded him of the transformation of fire release. He aimed to simulate the process of the flower blooming to enhance the explosive power of fire release chakra. The blooming of the flower symbolized the process of an explosive outburst. However, whether this approach would work was uncertain and required careful experimentation. For the first step in his experiment, Shishi needed to master the control of fire release chakra to simulate the flower's transformation from bud to full bloom. The difficulty was undoubtedly significant. After a wash and meal, Shishi focused on the morning glories on the table and began his attempt. With his right palm open, he first performed the fire release chakra nature transformation, and a pulsating flame appeared on his palm. He then began to control this flame to mimic the shape of the morning glory. After some trial and error, it was already 10 o'clock. Shishi, feeling somewhat exhausted, ended his training and started to rest. Unknowingly, July was coming to an end. At the Konoha hospital, Shishi Hashida returned to the lounge with a smile after just finishing a surgery. Finally done. With 5 medical ninjutsu in total: basic healing jutsu, mystical palm technique, delicate illness extraction technique, yin healing wound destruction, and chakra scalpel, he had finally met the requirements of the tag tree. Activate. Shishi immediately chose to activate the medical expert tag. The proficiency in medical ninjutsu increased by 100%, and chakra control improved by 100%. Shishi immediately felt a significant difference. He was now constantly channeling chakra into the yin seal plus 8 trigram seal in his abdomen, which itself required a very high level of chakra control. This specifically reflected in the refinement of chakra, which needed a steady and meticulous approach, completely different from large-scale chakra refinement in combat. Previously, Shishi barely met the requirements, but now he could refine chakra down to the individual cells in his body. This feeling is incredible. Shishi smiled broadly, then opened his right palm. Over the past month, through constant practice, he had been able to shape the fire release chakra into the form of a morning glory flower, but he still couldn't achieve dynamic form changes. With the significant boost in chakra control, Shishi was eager to try it out. Soon, the orange-red flame in his palm transformed into a bud shape and then began to bloom outward. At that moment, Tsunade pushed the door open and was stunned by the sight of the blooming flame flower. Shishi looked up and saw Tsunade, then extended his palm towards her. "Lady Tsunade, what do you think?" Tsunade snapped back to reality, observing the blooming fire flower in Shishi's palm, and asked, "Is this the shape transformation of fire release?" "Why a flower?" "For fire release, in terms of shape transformation, it's usually spherical or dragon-shaped. What's the use of a flower shape?" "It's pretty, indeed." Shishi explained, "It's the fire body flicker jutsu." "Fire body flicker jutsu?" Tsunade still looked puzzled. "You'll understand better if you see it for yourself," Shishi said as he dispersed the fire flower in his hand, then led Tsunade to the small training grove where he practiced. Tsunade observed the blackened craters around and pondered. Shishi, meanwhile, lowered his gaze and concentrated for a moment. After opening his eyes, he leapt into the air, leaving after images. Tsunade immediately focused her attention and saw an astonishing sight. In mid-air, accompanied by an explosive sound, Shishi used the leverage in the air to propel himself even higher. Chapter 66, S-Rank Confidential Mission. "This guy?" Tsunade showed a look of surprise. In the air, Shishi Hashida was overjoyed. However, it was still in its early stages, and he wasn't very skilled yet. When he tried to control the force during the second mid-air explosion, he ended up crashing straight into a tree trunk. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and used yin healing wound destruction in advance, so there was no serious injury. But as soon as he got up from the ground, Tsunade was already beside him, asking, "How did you do that?" "By combining nature transformation with shape transformation." Shishi explained, "The explosive nature of fire release is enhanced by shape transformation, which simulates the blooming of a flower. The blooming process itself is the transformation of fire release chakra, essentially, the explosion. The explosion creates a shockwave, and the flower's shape constrains the shockwave, which then propels us at high speed. It's actually an advanced development of the basic body flicker technique." Tsunade, after hearing this, asked, "What made you think of using the shape of a flower?" Shishi smiled and replied, "It came to me when I was buying flowers with Shizuan last time and saw the flowers blooming morning glories." Tsunade immediately recalled that day. Shizuan had returned with flowers, looking very pleased. What incredible ninja instincts! Tsunade secretly marveled, then pondered, "This truly is a remarkable body flicker technique. It allows you to gain momentum mid-air, something no other ninja can do. Moreover, as you become more proficient, you might even be able to move at high speeds in mid-air." Shishi nodded, "Exactly." Tsunade added, "The difficulty of this technique is undoubtedly S-rank. Not to mention nature transformation, most fire release jutsu have explosive characteristics. But shape transformation? Just forming a realistic fire flower, let alone simulating its blooming process, is extremely challenging." And she noticed that Shishi did this without any hand seals. This means that this could be a hand seal-less fire body flicker technique. Shishi nodded. In terms of difficulty, it indeed reached the S-rank level. However, the technique wasn't fully completed yet, so it didn't meet the requirements of his tag tree. But the hardest part, the beginning, was already done. Now it was just a matter of refining the details step by step. And this fire body flicker technique was only the beginning. His ultimate goal was to combine it with the yin seal, and even add Tsunade's unfinished strength of 100 technique to form a fire release chakra cloak, allowing the fire flowers to bloom from any part of his body. Of course, this was a far-off goal. Just mastering the yin seal would take 2 to 3 years, or even longer. Adding the yin seal on his forehead would take even more time. But he's only 7 years old now, so time is on his side. Under Tsunade's watchful eyes, Shishi Hashida continued to refine the fire body flicker technique. It seemed he had set a good foundation, and within a few days, he made another breakthrough. The wind release chakra nature transformation was finally completed. This training was entirely a product of grinding through time with shadow clones. With that, the wind release expert tag was triggered, with conditions and effects similar to those of fire release expert. Having made this progress, Shishi decided it was time to end his retreat at the Konoha hospital. Not only because he needed to obtain wind release ninjutsu resources from Minato Namikaze, but also because he needed to apply these techniques to perfect the fire body flicker technique. In the evening, after packing his belongings for the mission tomorrow, Shishi sat down to review his training. By now, he was a true fire release expert. However, Shishi hadn't forgotten that his original goal in developing the fire body flicker technique was to enhance his swordsmanship, particularly to increase his speed. Thinking about swordsmanship, he couldn't help but recall the dance of the crescent moon technique. The dance of the crescent moon, what if I use fire release clones for it? Shishi couldn't help but think of the lightning release clone, which turns into a flash of lightning that can temporarily paralyze the enemy when struck. So, what about fire release clones? As he thought about it, Shishi grew more excited. He imagined the scene where a fire release clone is struck and then explodes, transforming into a blooming flower of flames. Fire release clones. I wonder if Konoha has any. Shishi pondered, even if not, it doesn't matter. A fire release clone is just a shadow clone formed with fire release chakra, so developing it shouldn't be difficult for me. The key is the exploding fire flower. Making the fire release clone explode isn't the problem, it's just a matter of chakra nature transformation. But the fire flower. It seems the fire release clone will need to self-detonate to achieve that. Looking at the time, it wasn't practical to go outside and experiment now, so Shishi decided to calm his thoughts and retrieved the ninjutsu scroll his mother had left behind. He decided to master wind release, gale palm first. The night passed without incident, and the next morning, Shishi Hashida woke up early. He started with his morning training, then tested out the gale palm technique. He found that releasing it was no problem at all, now it was just a matter of practice. It's definitely easier to train in wind release ninjutsu after mastering the wind release chakra nature transformation. I also need to find time to work on genjutsu. After breakfast and getting ready, Shishi dressed in his combat gear, slung his scroll over his shoulder, and headed out. As usual, they met at the old spot. After the entire Minato squad gathered, they left the village. On the way, Shishi mentioned to Minato Namikaze that he wanted to train in wind release ninjutsu. Minato agreed immediately and then smiled, "It looks like you're shifting your focus to wind release." Shishi explained, "Since the first stage of my fire release development is complete, it now needs a lot of real combat and time to refine and perfect it. I can temporarily shift my energy to wind release and genjutsu." Hearing the mention of genjutsu, Sani Kurama chuckled, "It looks like I might get to be a teacher." Shishi immediately played along, "Master Sani, I will be in your care." Uchiha Shisui, watching the exchange, also smiled, "Shishi, if you need any help, don't hesitate to ask." Of course, Shishi joked, "I've always had a thick skin, so there's no need for formality." As the three joked around, Minato's smile grew even wider. He thought to himself, with Shishi around, it feels like the atmosphere is even better. When they stopped to rest, Shishi Hashida learned his first wind release jutsu from Minato Namikaze. Wind release, vacuum sphere. A B-rank wind release jutsu that allows the user to continuously fire air bullets from their mouth. This technique is somewhat similar to a smaller version of the drilling air bullet used by Shikaku, the One Tail. Shishi remembered that Uchiha Sasuke, after awakening his Manjiki Sharingan, was once injured by this very move from Danzo. Wind fuels fire, Danzo, I'll get you one day. As he practiced the vacuum sphere jutsu, Shishi clenched his teeth in silent determination. Though things had been relatively peaceful lately, he was definitely someone who held grudges. Dash. Time flew by, and before he knew it, it was already September. Shishi Hashida continued his routine of completing missions while honing his skills. One day, Minato's team received another mission to head to the land of rivers. Sensing something unusual, Shishi couldn't help but ask, "Minato-sensei, the situation in the land of rivers has mostly returned to how it was before. If we go there again, won't that provoke an overreaction from Tsunagakuer?" The name Yellow Flash was already spreading, and the previous exploits of Minato's team had been so remarkable that their return would certainly agitate Tsunagakuer. "It's true the situation there has mostly stabilized, but this time it's just a routine guard mission," Minato replied. At least for now, he hadn't received any secret orders from the third Hokage. In the last battle, the land of rivers and the land of wind had conceded, giving up not only part of their iron ore profits but also some of the guarding and escorting tasks to Konoha. Before this, all of that was Tsunagakuer's territory. After hearing Minato's explanation, Shishi pushed his concerns aside. At noon, on the border of the land of fire, the team took a break. After enjoying some grilled meat, Shishi held his Totsuka blade, watching as a faint white light flowed along the blade, infused with wind release chakra. "My proficiency in wind release isn't as high as in fire release. The wind release enhances the blade's sharpness, but it's still not as good as the blue flame sky blade." As he withdrew the chakra, Shishi couldn't help but think of Pakura's scorch release. The fusion of two chakra natures creates a new chakra nature, and the fire from scorch release naturally possesses strong control and manipulation capabilities. It's similar to storm release, where the combination of water and lightning release makes the difficult to control lightning much easier to manage. Shishi didn't expect to master scorch release anytime soon, but that didn't stop him from developing wind and fire release combination jutsu, and perhaps even sword techniques. After all, his original idea was to use wind release to enhance his weapons, granting them even greater cutting power. Danzo had used wind release chakra to enhance shuriken and kunao. Now, Shishi could do the same, but the effect wasn't as strong as with his more advanced fire release techniques. However, if wind and fire were combined, it might lead to greater efficiency and higher temperatures. In fact, the combination of wind and fire release might be better suited for the fire body flicker technique, Shishi thought, his mind racing. He had many ideas, but they would have to be developed step by step. After an hour of rest, the team set off again, crossing the border into the land of rivers. Around 4 p.m., the four of them reached their destination, a mining mountain. They were there to replace the team that had been guarding the area. For the next half-month, they would need to stay there, periodically escorting the mined and refined iron to the port. Of course, guarding the area also meant protecting it from bandits, or even preventing them from taking over the mine. For rogue ninja, taking over a mine from ordinary people would be all too easy. But Shishi couldn't shake the feeling that sending Minato's team to handle such a task seemed like overkill. Sure enough, the next day, scouts from Tsunagakuer appeared outside the mine. The word had clearly gotten out. When Minato learned of this, he simply said, "Stay alert, but don't engage." 2 days later, Shishi spotted two familiar faces. Pakura of the Scorch Release. Raza of the Magnet Release. The sight of his enemies made Shishi's blood boil. Seeing that Shishi was alone, both of them seemed tempted. Another ninja from Tsunagakuer noticed this and quickly warned, "It's not the right time for a confrontation." Pakura was about to respond when Minato suddenly appeared beside Shishi. "Minato namikaze." Raza was visibly cautious. Soon, Pakura and the others retreated, while Shishi and Minato quietly followed them until they entered a town, at which point they withdrew. It was clear that Pakura and her team weren't planning to leave anytime soon. It seemed they had been specifically sent to monitor Minato's team. That evening, Minato received a confidential message from Konoha. After reading it, he couldn't help but frown slightly. Seeing this, Shishi quickly asked, "Minato-sensei, has the village given us new orders?" Minato nodded. "Yes, we have new orders, and there are 2 of them. But we've already completed one." Shishi pondered this for a moment. Kurama-sani guessed, "Minato-sensei, is it related to the Tsunagakuer ninja?" Minato nodded. "We need to draw Tsunagakuer's attention, and at the right moment, support another team on a mission." "Another team?" Sani asked. "Minato-sensei, which team is it? Is it like the last time in the Land of Rain, with intelligence agents?" Minato shook his head. "No, the specific information is classified. Sani was left speechless. Uchiha Shisui remarked, "It sounds like that team is on an S-rank classified mission." Chapter 67, Persuasion, the Blooming Flame Flower. Sparkle sparkle sparkle. Give me 200 plus PS within 24 HRS and I shall grant you an extra chapter. Sparkle sparkle sparkle. Even if it's an S-rank classified mission, we should still be given basic information. Otherwise, how are we supposed to effectively carry out our support role? Kurama-Sani questioned, confused. Shishi Hashida responded, "It's because we're positioned right along their retreat route." Minato Namikaze nodded. Shishi is right. He explained further, "Since we can't pinpoint the exact time of their retreat, we must remain vigilant at all times. Additionally, while we've already drawn some of Tsunagakure's attention, we can't let them focus on us constantly. So, we'll need to split into two groups. Shishi and I will form Group A, responsible for diverting Tsunagakure's attention. Shisui and Sani, you two will stay here. Shishi, leave a shadow clone behind, and make sure to inform us immediately if anything happens." The three nodded in agreement. Such a plan was only feasible because Minato had the Flying Thunder God technique. After making preparations and leaving behind a shadow clone, Shishi and Minato boldly set off. As expected, it didn't take long before Minato sensed they were being followed by Tsunagakure ninja. Pakura and Raza were among them. Without paying any attention to the Tsunagakure squad trailing them, Shishi and Minato continued on their path. What are those two trying to do? This direction, could they be heading towards the village-guarded mine? Pakura couldn't make sense of Shishi and Minato's movements. Raza was equally puzzled. Perhaps they're just returning the favor, an eye for an eye. Pakura scoffed. I think Konoha sent them with ulterior motives. They're probably still bitter about the last outcome. Raza's expression darkened. We've already made concessions. If Konoha keeps pushing, I don't think the third Kazekage would hesitate to go to war. Even the daimyo wouldn't oppose it. Pakura nodded, then sneered, "It's a shame that hands backed down. The so-called demigod of the shinobi world has grown soft. This mountain should do." Minato Namikaze stood atop the mountain, looking out at the distant mine, which was guarded by Tsunagakure. Shishi Hashida glanced at the illuminated mine across the way, still lit even in the dark of night, and then said, "Sensei, I'll go look for a water source." Minato nodded in agreement. Shishi turned and left, quickly finding a waterfall and a pool. The two of them then set up camp by the waterfall. From their observation point in the distance, Raza and Pakura exchanged puzzled glances. Afterward, they retreated to the mine. Raza stayed behind to keep watch, while Pakura left to report the situation to Cho. The night passed without incident. The next morning, Shishi followed the stream to catch some fish and unknowingly arrived at a small lake. The lake was adorned with many water lotuses, which were quite beautiful. After catching a few fish, Shishi was about to head back when he suddenly turned to look again at the multi-layered petals of the water lotuses. Water lotuses, with multiple petals. His eyes lit up with excitement, eager to test something out immediately. Taking a deep breath to calm his impulse, he returned to the waterfall with the fish in hand. While having fish soup, Shishi asked, "Sensei, what do you think this mission is about?" Minato didn't answer directly but instead said, "Although we forced the Land of Rivers and Tsunagakure to back down last time, the fact remains that the Land of Rivers is leaning toward Tsunagakure." Shishi nodded. "That's a matter of interest. Konoha is stronger than Tsunagakure, which is why the Land of Rivers sided with us after breaking away from Omegakure. But now, with Tsunagakure offering better benefits, they've naturally shifted their allegiance. The key lies with the two magnet release users in Tsunagakure, the third Kazekage and Raza. According to Shishi's knowledge, Raza manipulates gold dust. But if he can control gold dust, there's no reason he can't control iron sand as well. Why, then, is Raza known for manipulating gold dust in the ninja world, distinguishing himself from the third Kazekage, who uses iron sand? Perhaps it's due to changes in his environment or personal circumstances. But either way, while the fourth Kazekage later mined gold dust in the desert to alleviate Tsunagakure's financial problems, it makes perfect sense that the third Kazekage is now using magnet release to prospect for minerals. The core issue remains, in the absence of an all-out war, eliminating the daimyo of the Land of Rivers, who currently favors Tsunagakure, seems like the best option for Konoha, or rather, the most likely choice for the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. As for the argument that killing the daimyo would have too big of an impact, the land of rivers is just a small nation and doesn't enjoy the privileges of the 5 great nations. And Shishi remembered that in the original story, the third Tsuchikage hired the Akatsuki to stage coups in many small countries. So, would Tsunagakure anticipate that the daimyo of the land of rivers is in danger? Shishi thought it was inevitable. After all, as one of the 5 great ninja villages, they were well aware of these tactics. Sensei, if this mission fails, everything the village has worked to reclaim will be lost, Shishi said. Minato nodded, then smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, the third Hokage must have considered this carefully. The person chosen to carry out the mission will be someone extremely reliable. Shishi pondered this and realized why the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, would send Sakumo Hatake on this mission instead of the more ruthless Orochimaru. It seems that Cho is stationed at the daimyo's residence in the land of rivers. To deal with a powerful puppet master, a high-speed, high-attack ninja like Sakumo Hatake is indeed the best choice. At the daimyo's residence in the land of rivers, Pakura met with Cho and reported the situation in full detail. Cho frowned upon hearing it. The yellow flash. After a moment of thought, she immediately gave an order, return at once. Minato Namikaze's target might be Raza. Pakura was taken aback. Raza. Because of his magnet release. But the third Kazekage. Could Konoha be planning to assassinate the third Kazekage? Cho shook her head. The third Kazekage is in the village, we don't need to worry about him. Now go. Pakura nodded and quickly left. After she was gone, Chiyo's younger brother, Ebis, asked, Sister, do you really think Konoha would target Raza and the third Kazekage? Cho replied, if Raza is attacked, it confirms that someone is trying to assassinate the third Kazekage. However, the third Hokage likely doesn't have the resolve for such a bold move. The last Shinobi World War ended not too long ago, and the new generation hasn't matured yet. Ebis's expression grew serious. So, Konoha's most likely target is the daimyo. They will definitely come. Cho responded calmly, we'll find out soon enough. This was expected, wasn't it? If we were in their position, we would make the same decision. But we can't afford to be careless regarding the third Kazekage. Send someone back to the village immediately to ensure he remains vigilant. Ebis nodded and quickly set off to make the necessary arrangements. After breakfast, Shishi Hashida and Minato Namikaze stood at the mountain peak, gazing across at the mine on the opposite side. As they observed, Shishi asked, Minato-sensei, by showing up here, is there a chance that Tsunagakure might think we're planning to take action against the magnet release user, Raza? Or even attempt to target the third Kazekage? Minato paused for a moment, he hadn't considered that angle. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, had been very clear about avoiding large-scale conflict. Otherwise, after gaining the upper hand last time, they would have pushed to completely take over the land of rivers, leaving the daimyo with no room to waver. After thinking it over, Minato replied tactfully, there is indeed that possibility, but I believe Tsunagakure is well aware of the third Hokage's stance. In other words, Hiruzen Sarutobi wouldn't dare make a move against the third Kazekage. Killing the Kazekage would drive Tsunagakure into a frenzy, especially given that the current third Kazekage is reputed to be the strongest Kazekage with high esteem. Besides, assassinating a Kage is no simple task. Right now, Konoha likely doesn't have anyone capable of such a feat. Shishi, still watching the distant mine, smiled and said, so, if we were to make a move against Raza now, wouldn't that send a signal to Tsunagakure? That we intend to take down Raza, and also the third Kazekage, to leave Tsunagakure without any magnet release users. Minato was startled by the idea, then quickly realized what Shishi was suggesting. If we did that, it could easily lead to war between the two villages. But as he processed Shishi's intent, Minato added, so, you're suggesting we attack now, to send Tsunagakure a false signal, confuse the enemy, and lead them to misjudge our true intentions, thereby reducing the difficulty of the other mission. Shishi nodded. Exactly. However, as you said, Sensei, there is some risk involved. And, we haven't received any authorization from the village. Minato fell into deep thought, but he quickly made a decision and smiled. Let's go with your plan, Shishi. If anything goes wrong, I'll take responsibility. Shishi responded without hesitation, of course, we'll take responsibility together. We're a team, after all. Minato's smile broadened, but then he grew serious. I'll handle Raza. You take care of the other Tsunagakuer shinobi, just keep them occupied. Shishi nodded solemnly. Understood. Then he smiled again. I'd like to show you a new technique I've been working on, sensei. Minato returned the smile. I'm looking forward to it. With that, Minato vanished. Shishi immediately followed suit, disappearing into the forest as he headed straight for the Tsunagakuer shinobi guarding the mine. As they moved, the alert Tsunagakuer shinobi quickly noticed the threat. Amidst shouts, Raza and Made led a squad to intercept them. Seeing Minato charging forward, Raza immediately called out, "Leave Minato namikaze to me." As soon as he finished speaking, iron sand morphed into countless senbon, forming a dense cloud that enveloped Minato. Minato responded by scattering a large number of flying thunder god kunao. Made quickly warned, "Don't go near those kunao. Spread out." Before the words finished, Minato had already vanished, avoiding Raza's attack, and kicked a Tsunagakuer shinobi before they could react. Raza's next attack arrived, but Minato disappeared again. The other Tsunagakuer shinobi dispersed, while Made moved to assist Raza, trying to corner Minato. Just then, Shishi arrived. Standing on a tree branch, Shishi completed his hand seals and clapped his hands together with a snap. Fire release, Great Fireball Technique. Wind release, Gale Palm. The hand seals were for the wind release, while the Great Fireball Technique required none. After inhaling deeply, Shishi puffed out his chest and cheeks, then exhaled sharply. A line of fire shot out first, but it was quickly followed by a roaring blaze, creating a fearsome firestorm that surged forward. Wind and fire combination jutsu. The three Tsunagakuer shinobi who had been on guard against Shishi quickly performed their own jutsu in response, though they had been caught off guard. Wind release, Great Breakthrough. The collision of air currents caused a massive explosion, tearing through the surrounding vegetation and sending up clouds of dust. Shishi then formed more hand seals and executed the dance of the crescent moon, sending two fire clones charging into the swirling dust. Unlike the original technique, these were not shadow clones but fire release clones. Moments later, as the dust settled, the three Tsunagakuer shinobi were seen retreating in the face of Shishi's clones. Raza shouted, "Made, I can handle things here." Made immediately rushed towards Shishi. If he didn't, the others might be wiped out. That kid, Shishi Hashida, had extraordinary close combat skills, rivaling those of a special Jainin. As Made sprinted forward, he started forming hand seals. But Shishi wasn't about to let him unleash a large-scale wind release jutsu. A swift fire release, fireball technique interrupted Made, forcing him to use wind release chakra to blow out the flames on his body. Made abandoned the idea of using long-range wind release jutsu and closed in, engaging Shishi's two clones in close combat. Outnumbered 4-2, with one of the opponents being a seasoned Jainin, Shishi's clones quickly found themselves at a disadvantage. Soon, one of Shishi's fire release clones found itself in an inescapable position, about to be struck by Made's attack. But just as Made's strike was about to land, the fire release clone suddenly transformed into a blooming fire flower. Made's pupils dilated, and his ninja instincts screamed danger. He instantly used the body flicker technique to retreat, shouting, "Scatter!" Before the words had fully left his mouth, the orange-red fire flower exploded, blossoming into a brilliant flare. Boom! With the explosion, the three Tsunagakuer shinobi were sent flying by the intense flames, screaming in agony. Even Made, who had retreated as quickly as possible, was blown away by the shockwave. He scrambled to his feet, looking down at his severely burned arms, sweat dripping from his forehead. If he hadn't reacted in time. Made glanced over at his three companions, only to see blood pouring from their noses and mouths, their bodies covered in severe burns. They were no longer even capable of screaming. Chapter 68, Fiery Lotus of Buddha's Wrath, a Critical Decision. Fire Release, Fiery Lotus of Buddha's Wrath. Although the fiery blossom doesn't take the form of a lotus, Shishi Hashida decided to name it this way. This is an A-rank fire release technique, slightly less difficult than the fire body flicker technique, and much easier in terms of form manipulation. However, the power of this jutsu depends on the amount of chakra the fire release clone has left. Earlier, the fire release clone had already expended some chakra, otherwise, Made wouldn't have gotten away with just a few burn injuries. Now, seeing that Made hadn't been killed by the explosion, the remaining shadow clone immediately lunged at him. Made quickly retreated, throwing shuriken to hinder the clone and buy time to prepare his own jutsu. But what concerned him the most was Shishi Hashida's true body. This brat is even more troublesome than last time. Made gritted his teeth. Every time he tried to release a jutsu, he was interrupted. He kept retreating, using the trees as cover, until he finally found an opportunity. He created a shadow clone to engage Shishi's clone while his true body leaped onto a tree branch and unleashed a windstorm. The branch beneath Shishi's feet exploded, but his figure left an afterimage as he suddenly ascended. In Made's horrified gaze, a fiery blossom bloomed beneath Shishi's feet, propelling him even higher and completely dodging Made's wind release. Below, the windstorm swept through, clearing away large swaths of vegetation. Shishi flipped in midair, descending headfirst while rapidly forming hand seals. Wind release, vacuum sphere. Inhaling deeply, Shishi spat out a series of air bullets that shot toward Made below, leaving streaks in the air. Bang, bang, bang. The vacuum spheres pierced through tree trunks, leaving holes, and struck the mountainside, creating craters and scattering debris. Made dodged repeatedly, but in doing so, he managed to complete his own hand seals. Wind release, cast net. Standing on a tree stump, Made opened his mouth and released a net-like wind that swept upward. Shishi shifted his body, and once again, a fiery blossom erupted beneath his feet. His figure flickered as he dodged the jutsu and landed on the ground, appearing right behind Made. Fast. Made spun around, eyes wide as he saw the short sword descending. His right hand was already prepared to unleash a jutsu. He intended to withstand Shishi's strike and then counterattack with wind release. But just then, Shishi caught sight of a fireball approaching from the side. Instantly, he activated the fire release chakra in his feet and vanished. The fireball missed its target, and Pakura's figure appeared beside Made. Shishi came to a halt, just as Minato Namikaze appeared on the other side. Meanwhile, the fire release clone that had been entangled with Made's shadow clone exploded, taking the clone down with it. The battle was over, with 4 Tsunagakuer shinobi killed. Shishi Hashida and Minato Namikaze remained unharmed. In their second encounter, Minato's team had once again won decisively. Raza's expression was grim. In a one-on-one fight, he couldn't do anything to Minato Namikaze, not even graze him. Although Minato hadn't broken through his defenses either, he had managed to let Shishi Hashida eliminate 3 of Raza's comrades, and even the Jainin Made was injured due to a misstep. This brat is said to be only 7 years old. He might grow up to be another Minato Namikaze or Sakumo Hatake. After 2 confrontations, Shishi Hashida had left an indelible impression on Raza. On the other side, Minato quickly gave the order, retreat. As soon as the words left his mouth, both he and Shishi vanished. Watching Shishi and Minato depart, Raza immediately ordered, Made, after treating your injuries, go to the daimyo's residence and report the situation here to Elder Cho. Konoha may very well be planning to target the 3rd Kazekage. Understood. Made wrapped his burned arm in bandages and quickly set off. Upon returning to the camp, Minato Namikaze smiled and said, "It seems your new techniques are coming along nicely. Besides the fire body flicker technique, you've also got the fire release, clone technique. What do you call it when the fire clone self-destructs? How about calling it fire release, explosive flame blossom?" Shishi Hashida couldn't help but laugh and quickly responded, "Minato-sensei, I've already got a name for it. It's called Fiery Lotus of Buddha's Wrath." Fiery Lotus? Minato looked puzzled. If I'm not mistaken, that looked more like a morning glory flower, didn't it? Shishi nodded, this technique is only in its initial stage. The fire body flicker technique is also still in progress. The final form will be a multi-layered lotus flower. Minato thought for a moment but didn't ask further. Instead, he smiled and said, "Fiery Lotus of Buddha's Wrath, it's a fitting name. It seems you're better at naming techniques than I am. You're just realizing that now?" Shishi resisted the urge to make a sarcastic remark and changed the subject. "After today's battle, the Sand Shinobi will probably send reinforcements, right?" Minato nodded thoughtfully, "They'll definitely send more forces, but they might not concentrate them all here. They could also target Shisui's group, forcing us to split our focus and go help them." Shishi agreed. The Sand Shinobi weren't fools. They might not have a saying like besiege way to rescue Zhao, when the enemy is too strong to attack directly, then attack something he holds dear, but that didn't mean they wouldn't use such a strategy. After thinking for a moment, Shishi suggested, Minato-sensei, maybe you should leave a clone here. Minato hesitated slightly. Shishi reassured him, don't worry, sensei. My fire body flicker technique is nearly complete, so I can retreat if necessary. Whether it's Raza or Pakura, I'm definitely no match for them. But with your clone here, I'll have no problem getting away. And once the sand shinobi start moving, I suspect the daimyo's residence will make a move by tonight at the latest. After a brief moment of consideration, Minato nodded, all right. The two then quietly waited, recovering their chakra in the meantime. By the afternoon, Minato, now fully recovered, left a shadow clone behind and teleported away using the Flying Thunder God technique. Meanwhile, at the daimyo's residence in the Land of Rivers, Uchiha returned to the hiding place of Sakumo Hataki's team. Though he appeared calm, there was a hint of excitement in his eyes. Captain, the Sand Shinobi have mobilized. It seems something unexpected happened. 2 squads have been pulled away. Sakumo immediately decided, then we'll act tonight. I'll take care of the daimyo and Cho. Why, you 3 handle the distractions and keep the other Sand Shinobi occupied. Uchiha and the other 2 nodded in unison. They were all Jonin, making this an elite squad. Time passed, and night quickly fell. By the waterfall and pond, Minato Namikaze's shadow clone stood up. Shishi, the Sand Shinobi are here. Shishi rose to his feet, ready for battle. There are 11 of them. Using his sensory skills, Minato accurately pinpointed the number of Sand Shinobi and immediately instructed, Shishi, engage and retreat. Understood. Shishi nodded and swiftly departed, wasting no time. The Sand Shinobi's plan was clear, Raza, Pakura and Made would hold off Minato, while the other 8 would focus on Shishi. 8 against 1, including a Jonin. The Sand Shinobi clearly regarded Shishi as a Jonin-level threat. The Sand Shinobi also had sensory ninjas. As soon as Shishi began his retreat, they sensed it, and Raza immediately ordered the other 2 squads to bypass Minato and pursue Shishi from both sides. Boom! Explosions echoed behind him, but Shishi didn't look back. It was night, and even if Shishi turned around, he wouldn't be able to see much. Moments later, his ears twitched. The pursuers were here. The Sand Shinobi were chasing at full speed. The fastest Jonin quickly overtook Shishi, appearing ahead of him and finishing his hand seals. His chest swelled as he opened his mouth, unleashing a fierce wind in the dark of night. Shishi's chakra surged beneath his feet as he soared into the air. Behind him, the other Sand Shinobi made their moves. Some used wind release, others fire release, and one puppet master fired a barrage of hidden weapons aimed at the airborne Shishi. In midair, Shishi had already dodged the Jonin's attack. As he turned around while descending, he too had finished his wind release hand seals. He brought his hands together and exhaled sharply downward. Fire release, great fireball technique. Wind release, gale palm. Once again, a combination technique and intense firestorm collided with the attacks of the 7 Sand Shinobi. Heat waves rolled back as Shishi, who was falling, suddenly shot upward again, simultaneously hurling several kunao, some of which were rigged with explosive tags and smoke bombs. Boom! Bang! Fire and smoke erupted, shrouding the area in a thick veil. The Sand Shinobi below quickly used wind release to disperse the smoke, and the sensory ninja immediately tracked Shishi's location. To the left. The sensory ninja shouted, it's a clone. The leading Jonin immediately warned, don't let his clone get close. A clone that could self-destruct was far more dangerous than an explosive tag. Letting it get near would be akin to gambling with their lives. The Sand Shinobi swiftly joined forces to unleash mid to long-range attacks, destroying Shishi's clone before it could approach. But then, the sensory ninja detected another Shishi to the right. The leading Jonin decided to split the group, leaving 4 to eliminate the clone while he led the rest to pursue the real Shishi. From the memories returned by his clone, Shishi knew the Sand Shinobi had split up, which made him secretly pleased. But his satisfaction was short-lived. The Sand Shinobi gave him no chance to engage in close combat. They had prepared their jutsu in advance, launching them in rotation. Soon, the 4 Sand Shinobi caught up, forcing Shishi to keep running. Meanwhile, at the daimyo's residence in the Land of Rivers, Sakumo Hataki's team emerged from their hiding place, each member wearing a mask and a black cloak, with no visible signs of their allegiance to Konoha. The 4 split into 2 teams. Uchiha and 2 others would draw the Sand Shinobi's attention, while Sakumo headed straight for the daimyo. Under the cover of darkness, the daimyo's residence quickly became chaotic, with explosions echoing throughout the city. The battle had begun. As expected, the sand shinobi were drawn away by Uchiha's team, while Sakumo advanced through the night like a phantom, easily making his way into the daimyo's sleeping quarters. Suddenly, Sakumo halted, staring at the figure ahead of him. Cho. The white fang of Konoha. Cho glared at the figure before her. Sakumo didn't respond. He drew his blade, which flashed white as he struck. "So what if you kill the daimyo?" Cho said, and in the next moment, her body exploded into a puff of smoke. "A clone." Sakumo stopped, a change in expression hidden beneath his mask. Had the daimyo been moved? Impossible. The daimyo's attendants had been hypnotized by Uchiha, confirming that the daimyo hadn't been relocated. So why did Cho abandon the daimyo of the Land of Rivers? This thought flashed through his mind, and Sakumo immediately leaped onto the roof, looking towards Uchiha's location. Chiyo's real body was there too. The daimyo was right in front of him, but on the other side, Uchiha and the others were in a deadly situation. In that moment, Sakumo faced a difficult choice. Should he complete the mission, allowing his comrades to suffer severe casualties? Or should he save his comrades and abandon the mission? But in an instant, Sakumo made his decision. He turned and headed straight for the battlefield where Uchiha was. He didn't create a clone to finish off the daimyo. Facing a powerful puppet master like Cho, he couldn't afford to be careless. Otherwise, not only would they fail to break through, but the entire team might be left behind. Chapter 69, A Surprise Attack. Sakumo Hatake moved like a flash of white light, as sharp as the deadliest fang, tearing through the sand shinobi's encirclement with overwhelming force. Retreat. At his command, Uchiha immediately led the two injured comrades to retreat. Among the three of them, he was the only one uninjured. As they withdrew, Sakumo continued to fight while retreating. His fearsome blade was so sharp that even Cho couldn't stop him. This sword was too lethal. Facing the man who killed her son and daughter-in-law, even Cho had no choice but to watch as Sakumo and his team broke through the encirclement and vanished into the night. "Sister, the daimyo is safe," said Ebis, who appeared beside Cho. Cho responded calmly, "It seems Hiruzen Sarutobi chose the wrong person." She had already prepared for the possibility that the daimyo of the Land of Rivers might be killed. If that happened, they would simply support a new daimyo and, in his name, completely expel Konoha's influence. Of course, this would inevitably lead to both open and covered conflicts with Konoha. Since Konoha intended to eliminate the daimyo of the Land of Rivers, there were likely supporters within the country who had their own candidate in mind. When great nations or shinobi villages involve themselves in the coups of smaller nations, this is the kind of tactic they employ. "The daimyo is safe now. Brother, you can go and claim credit from him," Cho added. Ebis's face twitched at her words. On the other side, Shishi Hashida continued to fight while retreating. This was where his explosive power proved invaluable, allowing him to avoid being surrounded and trapped. The fire body flicker technique further played to his advantage, enabling him to maneuver in midair and evade the sand shinobi's large-scale wind release attacks, quickly escaping the battlefield. When the memories from his shadow clone near the mine returned, Shishi felt completely relieved. With Minato Namikaze's real body over there, the sand shinobi's surprise attack had hit a solid wall, forcing them into a hasty and costly retreat. Before long, Minato arrived with Uchiha Shisui and Kurama Sani to assist Shishi. The pursuing sand shinobi, shocked by their arrival, quickly turned and fled. Elsewhere, the Minato who had been keeping Raza and Pakura at bay suddenly disappeared in a puff of smoke. "A shadow clone! Damn it!" Raza and the other two immediately rushed forward at top speed. "There's no need to chase them," Minato ordered, deciding not to pursue further. He hadn't forgotten the primary mission, to rendezvous with the other team. Minato's team promptly withdrew back to their base, while Raza and his group also regrouped, falling into silence. Both of their strikes had failed. One group suffered no losses but gained nothing, while the other was devastated, with only 2 survivors from 2 entire squads. Without a doubt, this was an extremely unsuccessful operation. Raza never expected Minato Namikaze to be so bold as to leave only a shadow clone to deal with him and Pakura. Arrogance. But also, a clear sign of their underestimation. Yet, despite several confrontations, they hadn't managed to gain any advantage. "Let's retreat to the mine and report the situation to Lady Cho before planning our next move," Raza said reluctantly. After retreating to the cave and resting briefly, Minato Namikaze said, Shishi, Sani, you stay here and stay alert. Shisui, you and I will go out for reconnaissance. Shishi Hashida and his two companions nodded in agreement, understood. Minato and Shisui then departed. As time passed slowly in the darkness, Shishi, who was on guard, noticed some movement and immediately made the call of a night owl. Responding to this, Sani quickly appeared beside Shishi, asking, Shishi, is it Sand Shinobi? Just as he finished speaking, another night owl call came from ahead. Shishi smiled, it seems it's Minato-sensei and the others. Even so, he didn't move immediately and continued to wait silently until Uchiha Shisui arrived before approaching them. Shishi, prepare to assist with the injured immediately. Minato's voice came from behind. Shishi looked and saw Minato carrying someone in a black cloak with an animal mask. There were also 3 other similarly dressed individuals, one of whom was also being carried. 2 members of their 4-man team were injured. Let's head to the cave. Shishi turned and went back to the cave first, spreading out his vest to reveal numerous medical tools. Shisui and Sani quickly helped to place the injured and began using Shishi's medical tools to cut away their clothes. They are heavily poisoned. Have they taken any antidote pills? Shishi asked. They have, but it didn't work, came the voice of Sakumo Hatake. Without lifting his head, Shishi performed hand seals to summon a chakra surgical blade, swiftly cutting open the wounds of the injured to remove all the poisoned needles and hidden weapons from their bodies. This poison is not a common type used by Sand Shinobi. It seems they encountered a particularly skilled puppet master. Cho of the Sand Shinobi. Shishi continued working as he spoke. Sakumo replied, yes, Cho. She is currently the most powerful puppet master in the sand. I've heard Lady Tsunade speak of her a master of poison. This type of poison needs to be analyzed to formulate a specific antidote. As he spoke, Shishi had already removed all the hidden weapons from the 2 injured and treated the non-toxic wounds. With the medical expert tag, his medical abilities had significantly improved, making his treatment speed exceptional. However, Uchiha Y, sounding anxious, asked, isn't there a way to fully save them? Shishi looked up and saw the crimson eyes beneath the mask. Uchiha clan. Shishi was a bit surprised but quickly performed hand seals, saying, I can't completely remove the poison. I can extract the toxins, but I can't remove the previous damage. I can only ensure it doesn't worsen. He summoned a shadow clone to assist, with each one using the delicate illness extraction technique to continuously remove toxins from the 2 injured. Uchiha Y sighed in relief and bowed deeply, please make sure to save them. Thank you. Shishi replied, don't worry. Although I don't know them, they are still my comrades. Uchiha Y looked at Shishi with a newfound respect. Minato and Sakumo exchanged glances and silently stepped out of the cave. In the mountain breeze, they remained silent. Due to the confidential nature of their mission, Minato couldn't inquire casually, and Sakumo couldn't disclose mission details. Both adhered to the principles of being shinobi. 5 minutes later, Shishi Hashida walked out of the cave and said, Minato-sensei, the toxins in the 2 injured have been removed, and they have taken the antidote pills prepared by Lady Tsunade. They're stable for now. But to completely detoxify and prevent any long-term effects, we need to get them back to Konoha as soon as possible to analyze the poison and prepare a specific antidote. Minato Namikaze nodded and said to Sakumo Hatake, Senpai, please take the injured back to Konoha immediately. Sakumo nodded, thanked Shishi, and headed back to the cave. Shishi watched them leave and couldn't help but say, how about we strike back? Minato and Sakumo were both stunned. Shishi continued, the injured can be escorted by Shisui and the others. If we go back now, the Sand Shinobi's defenses should be at their weakest. Although he didn't know the exact situation at the daimyo's residence, he had some guesses. Sakumo, standing at the cave entrance, turned around and said, even if we kill the daimyo now, it won't help. The Sand Shinobi seem to have prepared for the daimyo's death. Shishi said firmly, whether the death of the daimyo is useful or not isn't our concern, it's something the 3rd Hokage should consider. Our goal is to send him to the Pure Land, nothing more. Besides, given the current situation, the daimyo's death is the best option. If he doesn't die, the Land of Rivers will completely fall to the Sand Village. If he dies, even if the Sand Village tries to install a new daimyo, we and the Land of Fire can do the same. Furthermore, the new daimyo, even for the sake of internal stability, won't dare to completely turn against us. The worst-case scenario would be maintaining the current situation. After all, if we can assassinate once, we can do it a second or third time. The newly appointed daimyo wouldn't want to die without enjoying their position, right? A wise person knows how to choose. A counterattack. Shishi's words were not just to unlock the entry for Sakumo Hatake. They were also due to Sakumo's previous guidance on swordsmanship, his friendship with Kakashi, and Sakumo's personal persistence. Some things are always hard to accept, making one subconsciously want to change them. Now Shishi was indeed crossing the line of ninja principles. After all, Sakumo was on a confidential mission. But Sakumo was not without decisiveness. After a brief thought, he bowed and said, "Then I leave the injured in your care." Hearing this, Minato swallowed the proposal he was about to make. This mission, they were indeed not suited to directly participate in. Thus, Shishi and Minato watched as Sakumo disappeared into the night. "Let's go, we need to retreat immediately." Minato withdrew his gaze. Shishi nodded, a bit reluctantly. He wasn't sure if he had changed anything, but for now, there was nothing more he could do. Inside the cave. Upon learning that Sakumo was going back to complete the mission alone, Uchiha was very excited and almost wanted to follow, but was persuaded by Shisui, who used the injured companions as an excuse. The group immediately retreated with the two injured. To be safe, Shishi also sent a shadow clone to use transformation jutsu to impersonate Sakumo. Minato and Shisui were responsible for covering their retreat, while Shishi, and Sani were in charge of escorting the injured. Fortunately, the Sand Shinobi did not pursue them, and they traveled safely. By dawn, they had already entered the Land of Fire. After resting for half an hour, they continued their journey. Another hour passed, and Sakumo finally caught up. "Shisui, you and the others go ahead. Shishi, come and treat the injuries of our senpai." Minato's voice came from behind. Shishi quickly turned and went over. Sakumo's injury was in his abdomen. Shishi used a chakra surgical blade to cut open his clothes and vest, applying first aid bandages. He checked the wound and sighed in relief. Fortunately, there was no severe poison or damage to the internal organs. However, the wound was quite long. Shishi immediately summoned a shadow clone to help with the healing jutsu on Sakumo's injury. Additionally, he gave Sakumo a blood increasing pill as he had lost too much blood. 5 minutes later, Sakumo's wound was healed. "Thank you." Sakumo thanked him and added in a quieter voice, "The mission is complete." Shishi smiled, "Senpai, you're too polite." Everyone pretended not to recognize each other and continued on their way. Chapter 70, Lotus blooms with every step. I just saw we're in the top 3 in 30 days ranking. Keep up guys, and here is another chapter. Sparkle sparkle sparkle. Land of Rivers, Daimyo's residence. Cho and the others fell into a heavy silence as they looked at the lifeless body of the daimyo of the Land of Rivers. Although they had prepared themselves for the possibility of the daimyo being assassinated, they had previously thwarted the enemy's plans and didn't expect them to strike again so suddenly, catching them off guard. Cho was confident in her poison, and from Sakumo Hatake's actions, it was clear that he wasn't the type to sacrifice comrades just for the mission. But Sakumo had returned unexpectedly, and although they had stationed guards to protect the daimyo, the level of attention wasn't as high as before. "Let's execute Plan B," Cho said decisively. Plan B involved supporting a descendant of the daimyo to ascend to power, ensuring that the interests of Tsunagakure and the Land of Wind were preserved. This could even serve as an opportunity to further erode Konoha's influence. Land of Fire. As Shishi Hashida leapt through the forest, he glanced at the Uchiha ahead of him, who was carrying his comrade on his back. He couldn't help but think of the yet-to-be-born Uchiha Itachi. In his previous life, Itachi was revered as a god by many. He wiped out his clan at the age of 13, which was even more impressive than Kakashi becoming a Jonin at 12. After all, most members of the Uchiha clan who awakened the 3 Tomo Sharingan were Jonin level at minimum, and they held a significant advantage in one-on-one battles. By now, Shishi had already encountered 3 members of the Uchiha clan. Obito Uchiha had a kind heart but was somewhat timid, though he was also proud of the Uchiha clan's honor. His teammate, Shisui Uchiha, was gentle and always willing to help others. Unlike Obito, Shisui never spoke about the Uchiha clan's honor. The masked Uchiha before him, who had already awakened the 3 Tomo Sharingan, seemed to care deeply for his comrades from their brief interaction. They all appeared to be normal people. No, wait, are they really normal? Shishi suddenly recalled that he was only 7 years old. It was said that Uchiha Itachi had been brought onto the battlefield by Uchiha Fugaku when he was just 4 years old and had personally killed a dying enemy ninja who tried to launch a final counterattack. The first Hokage established the ninja village system to keep children off the battlefield. The second Hokage created the Ninja Academy to further refine this idea, Shishi mused. The standard system had children start their education at 6, graduate at 12, and then be guided by experienced chunin or even jonin, beginning with low-level missions and gradually developing their skills. But the first Hokage's death, followed by the second Hokage's demise during the First Shinobi World War, shattered that system, and the original intentions couldn't be upheld. Shishi sighed inwardly, no ninja is truly sane, are they? The stronger they are, the more twisted they become. It looks like I'll have to be even crazier and more twisted than them to survive. In order to get the injured back to Konoha as quickly as possible, Shishi Hashida and the others traveled at high speed, only pausing briefly when they reached the Fire Country's border. After that, they hurried back to Konoha without stopping. Namikaze Minato and Hitaki Sakumo went directly to the Hokage's office to report on the mission, while Uchiha Shisui, Kurama Sani, and the others waited outside. Shishi and Uchiha Wai took the 2 injured comrades to Konoha Hospital. Once there, Shishi and Nono Yakushi worked together to analyze the toxin. After identifying the components, Tsunade took over and began preparing the antidote. It was at this moment that Tsunade showcased her incredible skills, quickly formulating the antidote. As soon as the medication was administered to the injured, their symptoms improved rapidly. In this area, both Shishi and Nono Yakushi had a long way to go to reach Tsunade's level. Before they knew it, the afternoon had passed, and Shishi felt he had gained a lot from the experience. As they left Konoha Hospital, Shishi noticed Namikaze Minato waiting under a tree. He quickly approached, calling out, "Minato-sensei." Minato smiled and nodded, then said, "You've got a 7-day break coming up. Remember to come by my house for lunch tomorrow. Kushina's cooking has improved a lot, and she wants you to see for yourself." Shishi's face immediately fell at the thought. While Kushina's skill in sealing techniques was indeed impressive, her cooking was another matter entirely. Seeing Shishi's expression, Minato couldn't help but laugh. Kushina's cooking might not be the best, but he found it endearing. "That's settled then," Minato said as he disappeared. Shishi turned back to Nono Yakushi, and the 2 of them started walking towards the orphanage as the sun set. On the way, Nono suddenly said, "I'm handing over the management of the orphanage to Ayam." Shishi paused for a moment, and Nono explained with a smile, "I need to spend more time at Konoha Hospital." Hearing this, Shishi quickly thought it over and smiled, "Aunt Ayam may be strict, but she's very kind. I'm sure she'll manage the orphanage well. But if that's the case, you'll need to move out of the orphanage, right? Why not come live with me?" Shishi, with his thick skin, saw that Nono was about to shake her head in refusal, so he quickly added, "That way, you can take better care of me too." Nono hesitated for a moment, but finally, with Shishi tugging at her hand, she nodded and agreed with a smile, "All right, I'll take care of you until you're an adult." Shishi didn't care about the whole "until you're an adult" part. Getting her to agree was already a victory. That night, he still slept in Nono Yakushi's room, falling asleep to the comforting scent that was uniquely hers. The next day, after morning training and breakfast, Shishi headed to the small grove to further refine his fire body flicker technique. He wanted to change the blooming flame flower into the shape of a lotus, instead of its current trumpet flower form. Not only that, but he also needed it to be a double-layered lotus. The transformation from a trumpet flower to a lotus wasn't particularly difficult. By noon, Shishi had nearly perfected it. "Time to eat, then I'll continue this afternoon." Feeling energized, Shishi ended his training and headed to Minato's house for lunch. When Minato Namikaze opened the door, Shishi Hashida followed him inside and immediately saw Kushina Uzumaki smiling as she held a spatula. "Shishi, take a seat. The food will be ready soon," she called out. Shishi glanced at the array of dishes on the table and breathed a small sigh of relief. It all looked pretty good. Seemed like her cooking really had improved. Just then, Minato chimed in, "I made most of these. The last dish is the one Kushina cooked." Shishi's heart sank, and he heard Minato whisper, "Shishi, remember to encourage Kushina later." Forcing a smile, Shishi replied, "Don't worry, sensei." At this point, he strongly suspected that it wasn't Kushina who invited him over, but rather his unreliable teacher, Minato, who needed someone to share the burden of the unique cuisine. As it turned out, Kushina's cooking had only improved a little. However, Shishi took a big bite without so much as a frown, giving a thumbs up. Your cooking has improved a lot, Kushina-san is amazing. Minato, also eating heartily, nodded in agreement, without a hint of dishonesty. Kushina beamed with joy, then picked up the dish she had made and laughed, you've tried it, and that makes me happy. Now, go ahead and eat what Minato made. Shishi quickly grabbed the dish and set it back down, smiling, since you worked so hard to make it, it would be a waste not to eat it. Besides, cooking is like a ninja's training, it requires gradual improvement and a lot of encouragement to keep going. Kushina laughed heartily, placing her hands on her hips, and then patted Shishi's head with a smile. You're absolutely right, Shishi. Even learning to cook carries the spirit of a ninja. But seriously, with a sweet talker like you, no wonder you're so popular with the girls. Shishi pretended to be shy, saying, Kushina-san, I'm only 7. Both Kushina and Minato froze for a moment before bursting into laughter together. The meal turned out to be a great success, with everyone enjoying themselves. By the end of it, Kushina no longer treated Shishi as an outsider but as Minato's direct disciple, almost like her own younger brother or student. After lunch, Shishi helped Minato clean up before bidding farewell and heading back to the small grove to continue his training. Forming a vivid lotus shape out of flames was no longer an issue for him. Now, his focus was on maintaining the explosive effect of the flames for a longer duration. However, this continuity was not like the previous method where a single step would produce a flame flower. What Shishi needed was a sustained, stable effect that would allow him to seemingly walk on air, as if standing on water. Of course, this was a very challenging step. With his current level of chakra control, Shishi wasn't confident he could achieve it just yet. So, after successfully transforming the original flame flower into a fiery lotus and achieving a smooth, explosive release in mid-air, Shishi shifted his attention to the tag tree in his mind. At the same time, he officially renamed his fire body flicker technique. Fiery Lotus Steps. The name wasn't particularly fitting for the shinobi world, but Shishi felt it was incredibly appropriate. Immediately, the tag tree provided an evaluation of this fire release secret technique. S-rank difficulty. It met the requirement to activate the Fire Release Master tag. Shishi took a deep breath and instantly activated the Fire Release Master tag. In a flash, the grey leaf of the tag tree was enveloped in a blue light. It was a blue tag. Immediately after, Shishi felt a surge of electricity through his body, and his mind went blank for a moment. Fire Release Talent plus 100%, Fire Release Chakra Nature Transformation plus 100%, Fire Release Shape Transformation plus 100%, excluding Kekkei Genkai based fire releases, no fire release jutsu or secret technique would pose a learning obstacle. When his consciousness returned, Shishi carefully assessed the changes within himself. This time, the feeling was far more pronounced than when he had activated the Fire Release Expert tag. Spreading his right palm, Shishi effortlessly summoned a fiery lotus. The speed of its formation was leagues ahead of what he could achieve before becoming a fire release master. But that wasn't all at his mental command. The fiery lotus, originally orange-red, subtly shifted colors, transforming into a white lotus after a moment. White flames. The temperature was significantly higher than that of the orange-red flames. Among fire release users, Shishi had yet to see anyone else capable of producing white flames. The only exception was Pakura of the Scorch Release, whose Scorch Release orbs reached extremely high temperatures, appearing white. Of course, the temperature of Shishi's blue flame sky blade was even higher. But that was the result of stacking multiple effects under normal circumstances, even Shishi couldn't achieve that temperature with fire release alone. Now, however, Shishi could instantly raise his fire release temperature to match that of Pakura's Scorch Release. No wonder it's called Fire Release Master. Shishi grinned widely. The enhancements of plus 100% to Fire Release Chakra Nature Transformation and Shape Transformation had brought about incredible, immediate changes. And with his Fire Release talent now doubled, Shishi felt even more confident about further developing his Fiery Lotus steps. Calming his mind, Shishi dispersed the white lotus in his hand, then leapt into the air. As his upward momentum slowed and he began to descend, 2 clusters of flames appeared under his feet, resembling flower buds sprouting at his soles, which then quickly bloomed toward the ground. They looked like inverted white lotuses. The air distorted and wavered, and Shishi felt a momentary boost, halting his descent. He began walking through the air, with each step causing the white lotus to contract into a bud when his foot lifted and bloom again when his foot landed. Fiery Lotus Steps, the name was truly fitting. However, as Shishi continued walking in the air, he couldn't avoid missteps, causing his movements to become wobbly and unsteady. At times, the lotus would suddenly extinguish, causing him to drop. But with his fire release chakra nature and shape transformation both enhanced by 100%, and his talent greatly improved, Shishi progressed rapidly. Within just 5 minutes, he was already able to walk steadily through the air above the small grove, with each step blooming a lotus. Landing back on the ground, Shishi was panting heavily. Impressive, indeed. Stylish, too. But it's quite draining. Even though his physique had improved and his chakra reserves were far ahead of his peers, he was still too young. It's tough to work on physical strength, but thankfully, I have the improved yin seal. After consuming a soldier pill, Shishi sat down under a tree to rest, contemplating his next steps in training. End of chapter. T/N, original name of Fiery Lotus Steps just a was step-by-step lotus bloom, I changed it. Chapter 71, Summoning Beast. The further development of the secret technique Fiery Lotus Steps would require significant time, and the same goes for medical ninjutsu, which demands a deep accumulation of knowledge over time. Next, my focus should be on swordsmanship, especially mastering an S-rank Kenjutsu secret technique. Then, I'll tackle Wind Release, aiming to unlock the Wind Release Expert tag, and from there, I'll strive for Wind Release Master. After that, I'll move on to Genjutsu and Sensory Ninjutsu. I also need to figure out how to obtain a summoning beast and learn the summoning technique. Since it's a space-time ninjutsu, it should trigger the corresponding tag. The same applies to Sensory Ninjutsu, but I hope that if there's a Sensory Expert tag, the conditions to unlock it won't be as challenging as Fire Release Expert, otherwise, it'll be a hassle. Shishi Hashida contemplated, carefully planning the path he needed to take. There was so much to learn, so he had to take it step by step, prioritizing one discipline at a time, specializing first, then broadening his skills. Once he had rested enough, Shishi got up and continued practicing the Fiery Lotus Steps technique, determined to master it for use in real combat. By 4 p.m., he finished his training and headed to the usual spot to meet up with Shizuan and the others for their workout, and even had a spirited Taijutsu sparring match with Guy. On the third day of his break, Kakashi returned from a mission. Here, this is something my father asked me to give to you. On a cliffside, Kakashi handed Shishi a scroll. A gift from a senpai can't be refused. Since it's from Sakumo senpai, I'll gladly accept it. Without hesitation, Shishi took the scroll and opened it to take a look. Kakashi, curious about the contents, immediately leaned in to see, as he had no idea what was inside. Lightning Release. Shishi's eyes lit up. The scroll contained key insights into the nature transformation training for lightning release. However, as Shishi read further, he discovered that it wasn't just about lightning release, there were also training tips for earth, wind, and water release nature transformations, with content ranging from simple to complex, reflecting Sakumo Hataki's mastery of these techniques. Kakashi's eyes widened as well, and he asked, "Is my father planning to take you on as a disciple?" Shishi grinned, "What, are you against it, Kakashi?" Kakashi quickly replied, "Of course not. Ha ha ha, just kidding." Shishi laughed before turning serious. "Kakashi, you'd better work twice as hard. Sakumo senpai sees great potential in me, which is why he's passing on these secrets. As they say, the student surpasses the master. Kakashi, our goal shouldn't just be to become the next Konoha's White Fang. Otherwise, people might say that the tiger father has raised a dog son. And by dog son, I mean you." Kakashi felt like ants were crawling all over him and immediately stood up, "I'm going to train." As Kakashi walked away, Shishi rolled up the scroll and watched him go, a sly smile spreading across his face. "Kakashi, just you wait, there's more motivation coming your way." The days off were fulfilling and enjoyable, filled with training at the Konoha hospital, in the small grove, and hanging out with friends. Not to mention, Nono Yakushi officially moved in with Shishi. Time flew by, and the 7-day break was over in a flash. It was time to get back to missions. This time, they were heading to the Land of Rivers again. On the road, Shishi asked, "Minato-sensei, has the new daimyo of the Land of Rivers been decided yet?" Minato Namikaze replied, "Not yet. There are multiple factions involved now, not just us and Tsunagakuer, but Uegakuer as well. Even Kumigakuer's spies have been spotted. However, the matter of the daimyo is not our concern. The third Hokage has entrusted this to Root and the ANBU. Our mission this time is simply to secure the trade routes. Hearing this, Kurama-sani couldn't help but say, I hope nothing unexpected happens this time. Shishi and the others couldn't help but laugh at that. This time, however, Sani didn't jinx the mission. Everything went smoothly. Minato Namikaze's reputation as the Yellow Flash was already well known among the Sand Ninja. Although there wasn't an official order to abandon missions if they encountered him, his presence was undeniably intimidating. During the 7-day mission, Shishi Hashida and his team only had to deal with a group of rogue ninjas. However, throughout September, October, and November, all of Shishi's missions were centered around the land of rivers. They were tasked with guarding mines, protecting merchant caravans, and defending various towns in the land of rivers. Most of these were C-rank or B-rank missions. The only A-rank missions they undertook involved skirmishes with ninjas from Uegakuer and Kumigakuer. By December, the situation in the land of rivers had finally started to calm down. Konoha and Tsunagakuer, as well as the land of fire and the land of wind, eventually reached an agreement and joined forces to drive out the meddling ninjas from Kumigakuer and Uegakuer. It's worth noting that in December of Konoha year 40, Kakashi's team, much like Minato's team before them, was invited to the daimyo's mansion by the daimyo of the land of fire. When Shishi heard this, he couldn't help but ask, Minato-sensei, will Kakashi go through the same experience as I did? Minato shook his head. One double agent is enough. Besides, the third Hokage believes that Kakashi's personality isn't suited for being a double agent. Shishi thought about it and agreed. Cold and a bit tsundere, Kakashi wasn't really cut out for the role. What a shame, Shishi chuckled. The daimyo is quite generous. Being able to enjoy feasts every day, buy various items, etc. was all thanks to the daimyo's support. After discussing the matter of the daimyo, Shishi asked, Minato-sensei, how should I go about raising a summoning beast? Raising a summoning beast? Minato laughed. Powerful summoning beasts typically come from the wild and need to be tamed. If you're raising one yourself, you'll need not only various valuable medicines but also a bit of luck. The Inyazuka clan sells specialized medicines for raising summoning beasts, but even with those, there's no guarantee you'll raise a suitable summoning beast, let alone one that can understand human language. Shishi grinned, Minato-sensei, I'm not aiming too high. If raising one doesn't work out, I'm still young enough to search for and tame one from the wild later on. Minato thought of the toads from Mount Maiboku, but since he couldn't make a decision about signing a contract with them, he suggested, in that case, tomorrow we can head to the Forest of Death and try to capture a spiritually attuned creature to raise. Shishi nodded in agreement. The next day, Minato's team gathered and headed into the Forest of Death to look for a spiritually attuned animal. Before entering the forest, Kurama-sani asked, Minato-sensei, I remember we once had a mission to capture a summoning beast that appeared in the Forest of Death. Can Shishi buy that one? Minato smiled, I already checked on that. The cat has been sent to the Ninako clan. Ninako clan? Kurama-sani glanced at Shisui Uchiha. Shisui, I remember that clan has a close relationship with your Uchiha clan. Shisui nodded, yes, that's true, but I prefer crows. Shishi stroked his chin and said, raising crows sounds good too. Shisui, teach me how to raise crows. With the clone technique, shadow clone technique, and fire release, clone technique, Shishi already had 3 clone jutsus. If he could add 2 more, he'd unlock the clone expert tag. Raising crows and creating a crow clone technique seemed like a pretty good idea. Moreover, he still hadn't unlocked the transformation master tag. Raising crows could give him an additional transformation option. Chapter 72, White Tiger, High Temperature Laser. Entering the Forest of Death, Shishi Hashida and his team split up to observe the animals in the forest, searching for those with spiritual potential that could make suitable summoning beasts. A giant python. A massive spider. A huge gorilla. The Forest of Death was home to a diverse array of wild animals, each of them enormous in size. After spending the entire morning searching, the group gathered at the agreed meeting spot around noon to share the information they had collected. Shishi, I think this black gorilla would be a good choice. It's powerful, huge, and has thick skin that's tough to penetrate. This black wolf is also a strong contender. It's agile, has sharp claws and teeth, and is highly intelligent. It's also excellent at tracking prey, which could make it a great companion if trained properly. What about the spider? It's venomous and can spin large webs to trap enemies. Kurama-sani was the most enthusiastic, eagerly introducing the targets he had selected. On the other hand, Minato Namikaze and Shisui Uchiha had fewer selections, but their notes were far more detailed. Shishi carefully reviewed the options and finally locked his gaze on one specific target. It was the one Shisui Uchiha had chosen. Shishi, you're interested in this white tiger? Shisui noticed where Shishi was looking. Shishi nodded, this young tiger seems like a good pick. It's just started hunting on its own after leaving its mother. Since you, Shisui, say it has spiritual potential, it must be quite exceptional. Plus, raising a young tiger offers more room for growth. Minato immediately made the decision, first impressions are very important. Let's go check out the white tiger Shisui found. The four of them set off at once, following Shisui to the young white tiger's hunting grounds. They arrived just in time to see the cub lying on a rock, basking in the sun. This white tiger wasn't entirely white, it had rings of black stripes across its body. Because it was so young, it looked particularly adorable. Shishi took a liking to it at first sight and immediately decided, this one's the one. He then used the body flicker technique to appear right beside the white tiger. Startled, the tiger cub let out a low, immature growl. It was about to get up, but Shishi quickly placed a hand on its head, holding it down. Roar! The white tiger struggled and growled, glaring at Shishi with a mix of fear and defiance, but its roars were more cute than threatening. Shishi chuckled softly, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. He kept one hand on its head and began to gently stroke its back with the other. The tiger soon realized it couldn't break free and eventually gave up, staring at Shishi with wide eyes. Indeed, it seemed quite intelligent. Shishi grew even more fond of it and then channeled chakra into his left hand, carefully injecting it into the tiger's body. Roar! The tiger was startled again but soon found the sensation surprisingly pleasant, even closing its eyes to enjoy it. Seeing this, Shishi smiled and took out a special medicine he had purchased from the Inuzuka clan earlier. The tiger opened its eyes, sniffing the air as it caught the scent. Here, eat this. Shishi brought the pill to the tiger's mouth. The tiger sniffed it cautiously but hesitated to eat it. Seeing this, Shishi decided to take a more forceful approach, prying open the tiger's mouth and pushing the pill inside. Roar! The tiger struggled again. Shishi simply held it close, letting the pill slowly dissolve in the tiger's mouth. Hey? It actually doesn't taste bad? The tiger stopped resisting. Shishi released it and then stood up. From today, I'm going to call you Shiro. Hunt well, and I'll come back to visit you. With that, Shishi's figure vanished from the tiger's sight, leaving the confused cub to look around in search of him. Shishi, aren't you planning to take him back? Kurama-sani asked when he saw Shishi Hashida returning empty-handed. Shishi smiled, no, he's better suited to stay here. Minato Namikaze nodded in agreement, this environment will help nurture his wild instincts and ferocity. But Shishi, you'll need to visit him regularly. The more time he spends with you, the more he'll get used to you and even absorb some of your spiritual energy. Shishi nodded, got it. The three of them left the forest of death, and Shishi treated everyone to a barbecue meal. Back home, Shishi spread out the scroll of ninjutsu he had received from Minato. The scroll detailed the summoning jutsu, including its principles, the sealing formulas, and the hand signs, along with Minato's own training experiences and insights. Even though Shishi had an exceptional memory, he still read through the scroll 3 times, carefully pondering its contents before closing it. He then began practicing the hand signs to familiarize himself with them. Before going to bed, he focused on studying the summoning seals. To establish a contract with a summoning beast, it was necessary to create a summoning scroll. While it was possible to purchase such a scroll, Shishi, who had a solid understanding of sealing techniques and curses, decided to make one himself rather than waste money on a pre-made one. This required him to delve deeper into the summoning jutsu seals and fully understand them. The next day, which was the last day of his vacation, Shishi headed to the Ninja Academy. He wasn't alone. Kakashi, Shizuan, Kurenai, Asuma Sarutobi, and Rin Nohara were also there. Today was the day of the graduation exam for Might Guy and Obito Uchiha. Of course, this wasn't Obito's first attempt at the graduation exam. Not long after, a dejected Obito walked out of the academy. Shishi and Kakashi exchanged glances, both showing a bit of helplessness. Obito wasn't weak, his Taijutsu was strong enough to hold his own against them, and his fire release jutsu had improved considerably. But his clone jutsu was lacking, and he often messed up during exams. He even had a tendency to mess up at critical moments. Shishi remembered that Obito had failed his last exam because of a stomachache, which caused him to botch his transformation jutsu. If he were a bit more serious during practice, he would have passed by now. And, you were almost late just now. Kakashi showed no mercy, delivering a sharp comment to the already downcast Obito. Immediately, Obito's dejection turned into a burst of energy, his fists clenching in determination. Kakashi, you. That was just an accident, and I wasn't late. Kakashi replied calmly, but you didn't pass. Obito huffed, next time, I'll definitely pass. Kakashi, unfazed, said, you said that last time too. Obito, clearly frustrated, snapped, Kakashi, I challenge you to a duel. Kakashi was about to respond when Rin quickly stepped between them. Kakashi. Kakashi turned his head away, staying silent. Rin then hurried to pull Obito away. Shishi watched the whole scene with great interest. He's out. Shizun suddenly pointed out. It was Might Guy who had come out. Before anyone could ask how it went, Guy rushed over to embrace his father, Might Do, and then burst into tears. Immediately, Shishi and the others stood awkwardly on the spot. Watching the tears stream down their faces, Shishi couldn't help but think to himself, Guy and Do have incredibly active tear ducts. But listening to their conversation, it was clear that the news was good. At the age of 7, Might Guy had finally graduated from the Ninja Academy. December quietly slipped away, and 3 days before the new year, Shishi Hashida officially went on holiday, pausing all missions. However, this didn't change much for him, he was still as busy as ever. Every day, he visited the Forest of Death, Konoha Hospital, engaged in physical training, continued refining his technique, fiery lotus steps, and pondered the development of his next jutsu, which had to be at least A rank in difficulty. He already had 4 A rank or higher jutsu, Raise Nan, Blue Flame Sky Blade, Fire Release, Fiery Lotus of Buddha's Wrath and Fiery Lotus Steps. But he still needed 1 more A rank jutsu to unlock the Pioneer tag. Unfortunately, his Fire Release clone didn't meet the criteria, and neither did the 8 trigram seal. Maybe I should try creating the Wind Release, Rasen Shuriken. Even if I only complete 50%, it would likely be rated S rank. Shishi mused after finishing his Kenjutsu practice in the snow. However, the Wind Release, Rasen Shuriken wouldn't be particularly useful to him unless it was 100% complete, even though he had mastered advanced medical ninjutsu like Yin Healing Wound Destruction. Perhaps I need a flash of inspiration from the Pioneer tag to fully perfect the Wind Release, Rasen Shuriken. After considering this, Shishi returned to what he was most skilled at, Fire Release. Fiery Lotus Steps was a movement technique. Fiery Lotus of Buddha's Wrath was executed through fire clones, making it effective in close combat. His other 5 fire release jutsu covered mid to long range attacks. But even though the temperature of my fire release can rival scorch release, my mid to long range offensive capability still seems somewhat lacking, Shishi pondered. Water and earth style jutsu can easily counter it. So, should I develop a fire release jutsu with strong offensive power? Once this thought crossed his mind, Shishi immediately considered 2 existing jutsu. The first was the water release, water severing wave, used by the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, and by the toads of Mount Maiboku. During the battle between the reanimated first, second, and third Hokage, Tobirama's water severing wave pierced through the third's earth wall. The second jutsu was the Sage Art, Storm Release Light Fang used by Six Paths Madara, which sliced through the black rods created from Six Paths Naruto's truth-seeking orbs. High Temperature Laser. Shishi stroked his chin and made a decision. Developing a fire release jutsu with strong offensive power would allow him to temporarily conclude his work on fire release jutsu, except for Fiery Lotus Steps and the Fire Release Chakra Cloak, and then shift his focus to Kenjutsu and Wind style. High Temperature Laser. Shishi pondered, actually, techniques like the Grand Fireball Jutsu start as a laser or stream of fire when first expelled from the mouth. For a ninja, the farther you project chakra, the harder it is to control. Water's fluidity makes shape transformation relatively easier, but lightning, wind, and fire release are more difficult. Most fire release jutsu are spherical, and even the dragon fire technique isn't as detailed in form compared to something like the water dragon bullet. This is closely related to the nature of the chakra. Moreover, maintaining a stable form after shape transformation requires additional control. After thinking it through, Shishi stood up and walked to the frozen riverbank. Clap! He clasped his hands together and, after a moment of concentration, opened his mouth and expelled a blazing white beam of fire. However, the beam dispersed into a burst of white flames after extending only about 6 meters. This was still only a medium-range attack. He continued practicing, gradually increasing the attack's range. This process involved constantly condensing his fire release chakra, requiring both strong chakra control and adeptness in shape transformation. To prevent the fire from dispersing, a stable form had to be established. Time passed, and before long, the new year of the 41st year of Konoha arrived. This year was different from the past. Shishi Hashida spent it at home with Yakushi Nono, and only visited the orphanage the next day. On the 4th day of the new year, Shishi went to visit Miss Tenka. It was his first time meeting Tenka's already engaged older sister, who was only about 16 or 17 years old, not much older than Minato Namikaze. Her name was Tenna. After having lunch at Tenka's home and being sent out, Tenka asked, "Shishi, you've become very skilled with medical ninjutsu. Are you able to create medical ninjutsu scrolls?" "Medical ninjutsu scrolls?" Shishi asked, puzzled. Tenka nodded, "Yes, for battlefield first aid. They're quite rare because they're not cost-effective. Medical ninjutsu often requires precise control, and scrolls are difficult to meet those requirements. But for first aid in the absence of medical ninjas, it's still viable, though it will waste some chakra." Hearing this, Shishi smiled, "Is this for Tenna's fiancé?" Tenka poked Shishi's forehead, "Clever." Shishi patted his chest, "Since it's your request, Sis Tenka, I'll make sure to do it. Leave it to me." Tenka smiled and nodded, "I'll have someone bring blank scrolls to your home later." And she took out a wooden box, "Here, this is a New Year's gift from me. You're going on a mission, so you might miss your birthday." Shishi immediately accepted the box with a smile, "Then I'll take it without hesitation. Thank you." After saying that, he leaned in and gave Tenka a kiss on the forehead before using body flicker technique to disappear. "Little rascal!" Tenka scolded with a smile, then touched her forehead with a faint blush on her cheeks. Taking advantage of the gift, Shishi now found himself on an empty rooftop, opening the wooden box Tenka had given him. Inside was a kunao. "Is this made of the same material as the Tostoka blade?" Shishi wondered, taking it out to test. It indeed had high chakra permeability. Holding the kunao, he suddenly had an idea. The high-temperature laser might be used with the kunao to allow the fire release chakra to adhere. But this doesn't seem very different from the blue flame sky blade. Shishi thought, but I can practice with the kunao first and then gradually phase out the kunao. With this thought in mind, Shishi bought sake and some of Shizuan's favorite snacks and went to the Senjua family estate. This was a prior arrangement, so he couldn't go back on his word. When Shizuan opened the door and happily accepted the gift, she led Shishi to Tsunade. Upon entering, Shishi saw Tsunade engrossed in some scrolls, with many scrolls scattered across the table and the floor. These scrolls were clearly quite old. Such depth of knowledge! Shishi sighed inwardly, then focused on the 2 mountains on the table. No, it was Tsunade sitting behind the table. "Lady Tsunade!" Shishi greeted. Tsunade looked up briefly before lowering her head again, slightly annoyed, "Just sit anywhere, or go play with Shizuan. I don't have time to entertain you right now." This mood seemed off. It looked like she was facing a problem. Shishi glanced at Shizuan, exchanged a look, and confirmed his suspicion. He immediately walked over and sat down opposite Tsunade, saying, "Lady Tsunade, if you're facing a problem, maybe talking about it could help. I might be able to assist." Tsunade looked up, frowning, "You won't be much help." Shishi shook his head, "That may not be true. While my medical ninjutsu skills might not match yours, I do have some expertise in ninjutsu development." Tsunade rubbed her forehead and said, "It's not medical ninjutsu, but a technique for controlling chakra." Shishi became even more interested, "In that case, I'm more relevant. The foundation of techniques is hand signs and seals, and I'm quite skilled in that area. The seal expert tag also includes seals, and the basics of these are hand seals/signs that are relatively obscure and difficult for most people." End of chapter. Next, Spacetime Expert. T/N, of course, the author did write little white here, so I have to change it. I hope you like Shiro. Also, does anyone have a good name for the high-temperature laser skill? Chapter 73, The Envoy of Space-Time. While eating snacks and watching the intense discussion between Shishi and Tsunade, Shizune felt very happy, even though she couldn't participate in the conversation. The discussion between Shishi and Tsunade continued well into the night, only stopping when Shizune finished preparing dinner. During dinner, Tsunade said, "Shizune, once school starts, apply for graduation." Shizune was taken aback, then instinctively nodded, "Okay, Lady Tsunade." Tsunade glanced at Shishi before continuing, "After you graduate, start at Konoha Hospital. I'll have Yakushi no mentor you." Shishi understood and quickly added with a smile, "Don't worry, Shizune, I'll talk to the director too." With her cheeks puffed up from the delicious food, Shizune nodded happily, After dinner, Shishi, wrapped in the scarf Shizune had given him, waved goodbye and left. Under the streetlights, Shizune watched as Shishi disappeared into the darkness, snowflakes swirling around him. "He's already out of sight." Tsunade's voice suddenly broke the silence. Blushing, Shizune turned around to see Tsunade leaning slightly tipsy against the doorframe, holding a sake bottle. "Lady Tsunade, it's too cold out here. Let's go back inside." Shizune quickly stepped forward to support Tsunade. Tsunade took another sip of sake and muttered, "That little rascal is just like Jiraiya, such a pervert." "That's not true, Lady Tsunade. You must have misunderstood Shishi," Shizune softly defended. "Humph, that kid always stares at my chest." "Oh no." As the door closed behind them, their voices were gradually drowned out by the wind and snow. Returning home through the snow, Shishi found that Yakushi no had already prepared a hot soup. After taking a sip, the chill in his body melted away, and he smiled, "Director, your cooking is getting better and better." No smiled as she gently brushed the snow off Shishi, "As long as Shishi likes it. The herbal bath is ready too, so head there after you finish your soup." Nodding, Shishi downed the rest of the soup, then gathered his clothes and headed to the bathroom for a bath. When he emerged from the bathroom, he saw No quietly mending his clothes with a focused and tender expression that tugged at his heart. Stepping closer, Shishi grinned, "Director, could you help dry my hair?" "Shishi, you're almost 8 years old now." No chuckled. Despite her words, she set aside the needle and thread. Shishi immediately lay down on the sofa, resting his head on No's lap. With gentle care, No used a towel to dry and comb Shishi's medium-length hair. As the familiar scent surrounded him, Shishi unknowingly drifted off to sleep, his arms wrapped around No's waist. Seeing him asleep, No became even more tender in her actions. She was well aware of the unique attachment Shishi had toward her, but she also saw his relentless efforts, and her heart ached with sympathy, unable to refuse any of his requests. Being able to stay by Shishi's side like this, it's good, No thought to herself. Shishi Hashida woke up at 5 a.m., feeling refreshed after rolling around in bed, thinking about the events of the previous night. The world outside was covered in a blanket of snow, but that didn't stop Shishi from heading out for his morning training. "Shishi, I knew you'd be here." In the snowy landscape, Might Guy, dressed in his iconic green outfit, stood out vividly. The cold did nothing to dampen his enthusiasm. "Since we've run into each other, let's have a sparring match, Shishi." "As you wish." Shishi agreed with a smile. Training with a partner was always more effective than going at it alone. Soon enough, the two of them were leaving clear tracks in Konoha's snow-covered world. Partway through, they encountered Kakashi, and their duo became a trio. After finishing his morning training and returning home for the hearty breakfast No had prepared, Shishi didn't follow his original plan to go out and train. Instead, he headed to the study. Last night, he had intended to complete the summoning scroll and wrap up his summoning jutsu training, but he had been derailed by No's kindness. As expected, a gentle embrace can be a hero's downfall. He sighed to himself before activating his double concentration mode to get to work. Time flew by, and after 2 hours, Shishi deactivated his double concentration mode and let out a deep breath. Finally done. He smiled, satisfied after inspecting the seal on the scroll. Then, he walked to the window and opened it, letting the cold air clear his slightly foggy mind. Just then, No entered with a bowl of bone broth. "It's fine to air out the room, but don't stand by the window," she reminded him as she gently pulled him away to sit down. "Thanks, Director." Shishi took the hot soup and drank it down in big gulps. Glancing at the scroll, Nono asked, "Is it finished?" "Of course." Feeling warm and content after finishing the soup, Shishi smiled. "I am a genius, after all." "Amazing." Nono took the bowl from him, cautioning, "Even geniuses shouldn't be arrogant, Shishi." "I know." Shishi replied earnestly, "I promised to protect you for a lifetime, didn't I?" Nono responded with equal sincerity, "I believe in you, Shishi." The two exchanged smiles. After Nono left the study, Shishi retrieved his Totsuka blade and placed it on a scroll inscribed with a seal. He then formed a series of hand seals and finally pressed his hands onto the Totsuka blade. In an instant, the seal on the scroll activated, quickly moving onto the sword, and forming the word Totsuka on the hilt. With the sealing process complete, Shishi grabbed the Totsuka blade, swung it, and stabbed it into the snow outside the window. Next, he approached another summoning scroll, leaving his bloody handprint and chakra on it. With everything ready, Shishi formed the hand seals again. Summoning Jutsu. As soon as he completed the jutsu, the Totsuka blade, which was stabbed into the snow outside, reappeared in his hand. The summoning jutsu was a success. Almost simultaneously, Shishi noticed some movement in the tag tree within his mind. Focusing his attention, he was surprised. Hey! He had expected to unlock something like the Space-Time Expert tag, but it turned out to be more than that. The Ninjutsu Master tag had also unlocked. So I've already mastered 30 ninjutsu. Shishi realized belatedly and started counting. Including the summoning jutsu, he had indeed mastered 30 ninjutsu. He used to think mastering 30 jutsu was a huge task, but now, it was completed almost without him noticing. But how many chunin in the entire ninja world could boast of mastering this many jutsu? It wasn't just about having the talent and time to train, resources played a crucial role too. Back when Shishi decided to graduate early, it was primarily for access to more jutsu resources. Without graduating early, he would have been limited to medical ninjutsu resources other than what Nono knew, there would have been nowhere else to learn from. Tag, Ninjutsu Master. Condition to obtain, proficiently master at least 30 ninjutsu. Effect, any ninjutsu hand seals can be reduced to 2, and ninjutsu talent is increased by 100%. The effect of this tag is undoubtedly exceptional, as expected from a master tag. Being able to reduce any jutsu to just 2 hand seals will significantly enhance the first strike advantage. The increase in ninjutsu talent applies to all types of ninjutsu. Fire release, wind release, lightning release, water release, earth release, genjutsu, and more. With this, I won't have to worry about having a low aptitude for lightning, water, and earth release techniques anymore. Shishi Hashida smiled. And then there's genjutsu. Right now, he was delving into the darkness technique. After briefly savoring the thought, Shishi shifted his attention to another leaf on the tag tree. Tag, Space-Time Envoy. Condition to obtain, proficiently master at least 5 space-time ninjutsu. Effect, space-time ninjutsu talent is increased by 100%, and physique is increased by 100%, since long-distance space-time travel requires a strong body. Reading the description on the tag leaf, Shishi felt a bit overwhelmed. At least 5 space-time ninjutsu. Where was he supposed to find them? The summoning jutsu, reverse summoning jutsu, Cloud Village's heavenly transfer technique, the flying thunder god technique aside from the ones linked to Kekkei Genkai, what other ninjutsu falls under space-time? Shishi couldn't help but scratch his head. If it weren't for the boost to his physique, he'd be tempted to complain. Fortunately, both the Ninjutsu Master and Konoha Genius tags enhance all types of ninjutsu, including space-time. Otherwise, I wouldn't be confident about mastering the Flying Thunder God technique. But the heavenly transfer technique from Cloud Village will be tricky. Maybe I'll have to create one myself. After pondering for a moment, Shishi set aside the thought, tidied up the study, and headed to the Forest of Death with the summoning scroll. The white tiger was hibernating, but as soon as Shishi appeared, it woke up, gave a low growl, and got up to nuzzle him. Shishi played with the white tiger for a while before injecting chakra into its body, helping it become more accustomed to the energy. After feeding it some medicine, he opened the summoning scroll. While the white tiger was savoring the taste of the medicine, he quickly pricked its paw. Blood oozed out, which Shishi pressed onto the summoning scroll, leaving a paw print. The white tiger didn't even have time to react before the wound was healed with medical ninjutsu, leaving it staring blankly at Shishi. Ha ha ha. Shishi laughed heartily, rubbing the white tiger's head. Shiro, now I can feed you even when I'm on a mission. After playing with the white tiger a bit more, Shishi finally left. Entering the Uchiha clan's compound, Shishi curiously observed his surroundings. The Uchiha were indeed a unique presence in Konoha, with the entire clan living in close quarters. In contrast, even the prestigious Hyuga clan didn't live so closely together. Shishi! A voice suddenly called out, making Shishi stop and turn. An unfamiliar Uchiha clansman was approaching him. After a quick glance, Shishi suddenly remembered, it's you. The person was Uchiha Y. He walked up to Shishi and introduced himself with a smile, I'm Uchiha Y. You must be here to see Shisui, right? Shishi quickly greeted him, hello, Y-senpai. Yes, I'm here to see Shisui. Let me take you to him. Uchiha Y offered. Not wanting to refuse, Shishi quickly said, thank you, senpai. The two chatted as they walked to Uchiha Shisui's house, but Uchiha Y soon excused himself and left. After watching him leave, Shisui gave Shishi a tour of his home. It was quite large, with the layout of a mansion, completely different from the two-room apartment Shishi lived in. But living alone made the house seem too empty, a stark contrast to Shisui's warm and sunny personality. Finally, the two arrived at the place where Shisui kept his crows. Shisui had built wooden houses to serve as nests for the crows during winter. Look, these are specially prepared for you. Shisui pointed to a few nests inside one of the wooden houses. Shishi looked inside and saw several young birds in the nests. Shisui smiled, but I don't recommend taking them now. The weather is too cold. Why not come by every day to feed them, and take them home after spring arrives? Shishi agreed readily, you're the expert, Shisui. I'll follow your advice. Chapter 74, Blue Flame Waterfall Blade, Kyuzagakur. The beginning of Konoha year 41 was rather leisurely for Hashida Shishi. Playing with the white tiger and feeding crows had become part of his daily routine. However, a technique he thought would be relatively easy to master, high-temperature ray, ended up posing quite a challenge. By the now thawed lakeside, Hashida Shishi winced, his mouth full of blisters. He got burned. The highly compressed fire stream in his mouth reached such extreme temperatures that even the yin healing wound destruction technique couldn't fully heal it. The reason he needed to compress the fire stream inside his mouth was that this position offered the most control over chakra, allowing him to compress the fire release to a laser-like state. Once ejected from the mouth, this would not only have an extremely long range but also tremendous power. Unfortunately, his mouth couldn't handle it. After treating the blisters, Hashida Shishi sat down on the ground, trying to reorganize his thoughts. A high-pressure water jet doesn't harm the mouth, and the storm release is a combination of lightning and water, which is further enhanced by Sage Mode, offering more protection. But plain fire release is different. It won't work unless he lowers the power. However, if he lowers the power, there would be no point in developing this technique. After much thought, Shishi couldn't find a solution, so he decided to set it aside for now and focus his energy on other matters. Time flew by, and before he knew it, the new academy year at the Ninja Academy had arrived. As planned by Tsunade, Shizune submitted her graduation application as soon as school started. On January 9 of Konoha year 41, Shizune successfully passed the graduation exam and officially became a genin. Shizune then entered the Konoha hospital, where she spent her days working with Yakushi Nono and receiving guidance from Tsunade when she returned home. Whenever Shishi was at the Konoha hospital, Shizune would follow him around like a little shadow. But after the new year, Shishi began taking on missions again with Minato Namikaze and the others. March passed in the blink of an eye, and Shishi's 8th birthday quietly came and went while he was on a mission. However, after the mission, Yakushi Nono threw a small birthday celebration for Hashida Shishi, complete with a birthday cake and longevity noodles. After eating the longevity noodles, Yakushi Nono took out a scroll. Shishi, happy birthday! Thank you. Hashida Shishi accepted the scroll, curious. Did the director develop a new medical ninjutsu? Yakushi Nono shook her head but smiled mysteriously. So secretive. Shishi grew more excited and immediately opened the scroll, only to be stunned. This is... The scroll was filled with densely packed seals, forming a series of complex jutsu. Given Shishi's current level of medical ninjutsu, it was impossible for him not to understand it, even though the scroll contained more than just medical ninjutsu. Yes, this was a ninjutsu scroll. Even those who didn't know medical ninjutsu could activate the jutsu within the scroll to perform techniques they didn't otherwise possess. In the original story, Shikamaru Nara once used a water-release ninjutsu scroll to fight Kakuzu. And this scroll before him was clearly a medical ninjutsu scroll. Director, this is the jutsu of regenerative healing, and the incomplete jutsu that Lady Tsunade has been working on. Hashida Shishi was very familiar with the jutsu on the scroll. Yakushi Nono nodded, smiling. Yes, it's the jutsu of regenerative healing, and also Lady Tsunade's incomplete jutsu. Tsunade discussed this jutsu with me before. Although it's far from complete, it can still be used. You made a medical ninjutsu scroll for Tenka before, so I got the idea to create this. Yakushi Nono's smile faded as she carefully explained to Hashida Shishi, however, the jutsu of regenerative healing requires extremely precise chakra control. Lady Tsunade's jutsu doesn't meet the necessary requirements yet. So, when dealing with severe injuries like missing flesh or shattered organs, this scroll can heal the injuries but not perfectly, and it may cause side effects. Because the healing process is too rough, relying on massive amounts of chakra to force rapid cell division, it inevitably shortens the injured person's lifespan. Shishi, you should know that the number of times human cells can divide is limited. Of course, if the injuries are so severe that ordinary medical ninjutsu can't heal them, then the shortened lifespan won't be much of a concern. Shishi nodded and then smiled. Don't worry, Director. I'll make sure not to need this scroll. If things go south, I'll just run. I wouldn't want to leave you behind. Yakushi Nono couldn't help but smile at his words. But she knew all too well that as a ninja, one could never predict what dangers they might face on a mission. The reason she made this scroll was so that even if Shishi encountered danger, he could come back alive. As long as he stays alive, everything will be okay. The next day, in the small grove, Shishi held the Totsuka blade in both hands, and soon, the blade was enveloped in blue flames. As he continued to pour chakra into it, the blue flames extended, reaching a length of 2 meters within moments. This was his new focus after hitting a bottleneck with the high-temperature ray, further developing the blue flame sky blade. Extending a fire blade from the Totsuka blade to increase attack range wasn't particularly difficult. If he were only using regular white flames, it wouldn't have taken Shishi nearly as long to achieve this. Dispelling the blue flames, Shishi shook his head. Too slow, and the range is a bit short. What he envisioned was a sword slash like Xiangxia novel's blade chi. A giant sword extending several meters. Not only is the range insufficient, but it also takes too long and consumes too much chakra. But, in fact, the entire blade doesn't need to be made of blue flames. The key part is the edge. Shishi's original design for the blue flame sky blade focused on reinforcing the blade edge with fire release. Covering the entire blade with flames made it easier to alter its shape. However, with the support of the fire release master tag, his fire release transformation capabilities had greatly improved, and the medical expert tag further enhanced his chakra control. It was time to test his original idea. Hashida Shishi took a moment to gather himself before injecting chakra into the Totsuka blade. In the next instant, the blade edge was quickly covered in blue flames. Immediately after, Hashida Shishi's gaze sharpened, and the blue flames, initially only covering the blade edge, rapidly expanded, not just covering the entire blade but extending outward to a length of 10 meters. It looked as if he was now holding a massive blue sword. The blade edge was a deep blue, while the giant sword above it was a faint blue flame, giving it a somewhat ethereal appearance. After reaching this point, Shishi let out a low shout, raised the Totsuka blade high with both hands, and then brought it crashing down. In an instant, the 10-meter-long giant blue energy blade sliced downward, splitting the small grove in two. Boom! The trees exploded, sending debris and dust flying. When the dust settled, a charred trench over 10 meters long appeared on the ground. Breathing heavily, Hashida Shishi grinned. Not bad power. Although 10 meters is still considered mid-range, it's longer than the range of Chidori's sharp spear. Unfortunately, it still didn't reach S-rank difficulty. Damn it! Pouting, Hashida Shishi swallowed a military ration pill and sat down to rest, thinking to himself, the sword technique extended from the blue flame sky blade will be called blue flame style swordsmanship, and this move will be blue flame waterfall blade. Scratching his head, Hashida Shishi felt a bit awkward about his naming skills. Suddenly, Hashida Shishi turned his head and saw Uchiha Shisui appear. Shishi, Minato-sensei has called a meeting. There's an urgent, Last-minute mission. We're to gather at the village gate in half an hour. With that, Uchiha Shisui vanished in a puff of smoke. It was a shadow clone. That urgent. Shishi didn't dare delay and immediately headed home to gather his things. After packing, he sent a shadow clone to the Konoha hospital to inform Yakushi Nono while his real body headed to the village gate at top speed. When he arrived, Minato Namikaze and the other two were already waiting. Let's move out. Without any unnecessary words, Minato Namikaze gave the order. The four of them leaped out of the village and entered the forest to the west. Our mission's destination this time is Kusagakur in the land of grass. As they traveled, Minato Namikaze explained, Kusagakur is an ally of Konoha. A critical situation has arisen, so they requested assistance from Konoha to send sealing specialists. The third Hokage assigned this mission to our team. According to the information from Kusagakur, the object that needs to be sealed is said to be a ninja tool passed down from the time of the Sage of Six Paths, possibly even crafted by the sage himself. Kurama-sani couldn't help but exclaim, a ninja tool from the Sage of Six Paths. That must be incredibly powerful. No wonder Kusagakur is asking for help with the sealing. So, it looks like the key players in this mission will be you, Sensei, and Shishi. Minato Namikaze shook his head. According to our own intelligence, other parties are also targeting this ninja tool in Kusagakur. So, this mission isn't just about sealing a dangerous ninja tool. That's why the third Hokage selected our team, instead of sending a sealing squad. Uchiha Shisui responded, so, Minato-sensei, you're saying we need to be extra vigilant during the sealing process. Minato Namikaze nodded. Exactly. At that moment, Hashida Shishi's mind was racing with thoughts. When Minato mentioned Kusagakur, the first person he thought of was Karin. With her Uzumaki clan bloodline, Karin would make an excellent teammate. Without Karin, Uchiha Sasuke would likely have been defeated long ago. And when Minato mentioned a ninja tool connected to the Sage of Six Paths, Hashida Shishi guessed it was probably the Box of Ultimate Bliss. Karin. Karin probably hasn't been born yet. Her mother might even be around the same age as Minato-sensei. I wonder if she's currently in Kusagakur. Maybe I can investigate while we're there. As these thoughts ran through Hashida Shishi's mind, he asked, Minato-sensei, did our village's intelligence mention who our enemies might be? Iwa Nin? Or Kumo Nin? Iwagakur had long aimed to expand its influence eastward, even eyeing the fertile land of grass. But Kusagakur was cunning, skillfully navigating between the great nations and ninja villages like a socialite, even managing to establish the Hazuki Castle, Blood Prison, with support from several ninja villages. As for Kumo Nin, Kumagakur had a reputation for stealing others' secrets. Kusagakur's unique fire release techniques were noteworthy, and not to mention, Kumagakur was the most familiar with the power of the Six Paths ninja tools. Chapter 75, Severe Injury. Iwa Nin and Kumo Nin are both possible suspects. Minato Namikaze stated, Kusagakur also has Kumo Nin spies, which is inevitable. Kurama-sani chuckled, looks like this mission is going to be quite challenging. Speaking of which, we've already fought against Sunanin and Iwa Nin. The only ones left are Kumo Nin and Kiri Nin. It's said that Kumo Nin are more proficient in Taijutsu and lightning release. Uchiha Shisui reminded him with a smile, proficient doesn't mean unbeatable, Sani. Don't underestimate the unknown enemy. Since this was an urgent mission, although they chatted along the way, Shishi and the others did not slow down at all. After only a half-hour break, they arrived at Kusagakur by dusk. Greetings, friends from Konoha. I am Muwei, a Chunin from the village. The one responsible for receiving Hashida Shishi and his team was a young ninja who appeared to be around the same age as Minato Namikaze. Upon hearing the self-introduction, Hashida Shishi couldn't help but scrutinize him. Nothing remarkable. I'm Minato Namikaze, a Jainin from Konoha, and one of those responsible for the sealing. Minato Namikaze introduced himself with a smile. Following that, Hashida Shishi and the other two also introduced themselves. Muwei then led them into Kusagakur to settle in. Since it was already evening and they were quite exhausted, none of them were in the mood to explore the village. After meeting with Kusagakur's leader, Minato Namikaze returned and said, the sealing is scheduled for tomorrow. After dinner, the three of you should get some rest immediately. We'll take turns standing guard after midnight. The three of them nodded in unison, understood. Even though Kyuzagakure was an ally of Konoha and this wasn't a battlefield, Minato Namikaze remained vigilant. Fortunately, the night passed without incident. The next morning, shortly after breakfast, Mu Wei reappeared to escort Hashida Shishi and the others to the sealing site. As they walked, Shishi discreetly observed his surroundings. In terms of scale and prosperity, Kyuzagakure was clearly no match for Konoha. It looked more like a village in the true sense. Perhaps I can explore a bit after the mission. I wonder if Keirin's mother is currently in Kyuzagakure. Hashida Shishi pondered quietly. With the destruction of Ozashigakure, the Uzumaki clan members scattered. Keirin's mother might have ended up like Nagato's mother, married after wandering for a while, leaving behind descendants. But was Keirin's mother a member of Kyuzagakure, or did she marry into the village and then get treated as a medical tool after her husband's death? Or maybe... We're here. Mu Wei's voice snapped Shishi out of his thoughts. Looking ahead, he saw a rather impressive building with Kyuzagakure ninjas standing guard at the entrance and on the rooftop. Creak. The doors opened, and a middle-aged man, around 40 years old, walked out with 2 Kyuzagakure ninjas. Mu Wei quickly stepped forward to pay his respects, and Shishi immediately understood that this was Kyuzagakure's leader. He greeted Minato Namikaze warmly, and was considerate of Shishi and the others, displaying great tact and hospitality. After some polite exchanges, the Kyuzagakure leader said, "We'll be counting on you, Jainin Namikaze. This ninja tool has already consumed 6 of our ninjas. If this continues, it could destroy the entire village. And according to the legends, the most worrying thing is that this ninja tool might be nurturing a terrifying demon inside. For the safety of the entire ninja world, even if it's a relic from the Sage of 6 Paths, it must be sealed." The Kyuzagakure leader spoke with heartfelt concern, and Minato Namikaze solemnly assured him that they would do their utmost to seal it. All for the sake of the ninja world. As Shishi observed the scene, he couldn't help but speculate. Did the box of ultimate bliss really devour 6 ninjas on its own? Would Kyuzagakure, which loved studying others' jutsu, really be willing to give up such a powerful ninja tool, possibly left behind by the Sage of 6 Paths? It's not overly cynical. Shishi had to assume the worst of others to avoid letting his guard down and falling into a trap. After the conversation, the Kyuzagakure leader led the 4 of them into the building, while Mu Wei remained outside. Inside the spacious hall, 4 massive pillars stood tall, and in the center was the ninja tool to be sealed, a peculiar, even somewhat eerie, box. Facing the entrance, the first thing Shishi and the others saw upon entering was an exaggerated human face, representing joy. Around the ninja tool, near the 4 pillars, stood 4 Kyuzagakure shinobi. On the ground beneath them, and on the pillars, were inscriptions forming a large sealing array that enveloped the box of ultimate bliss. Fire release. After a few glances, Shishi couldn't help but think, Kyuzagakure, which has managed to maneuver between the great ninja villages, really has some tricks up its sleeve. They're not to be underestimated. This reminded him of Takigakure's Earth Grudge Fear and the Jashin cult powers of Haiden from Mugakure. This is our village's unique binding technique, the Grand Fire Prison. Although it can bind this ninja tool, it requires constant maintenance. The Kyuzagakure leader introduced the technique, with a hint of pride in his voice, but then he sighed, "But for a permanent solution, we need Jainin Namikaze and the others to seal it. We'll be counting on you. Recently, foreign forces have invaded the village, so I'll personally stand guard outside to prevent anyone from disrupting the sealing process." Minato Namikaze immediately replied, "Rest assured, we'll do our best." The Kyuzagakure leader nodded and then left with his men, leaving only the 4 Kyuzagakure ninjas maintaining the binding array. Creak. The heavy doors closed, and the light inside immediately dimmed. "Shishi, prepare to perform the 8 trigram seal with me." Minato Namikaze ordered. "Shisui, Sani, stand guard." "Understood." The 3 responded in unison. Uchiha Shisui positioned himself directly opposite the door, while Kurama Sani leaped up to hide in the shadows of the ceiling beams. Minato Namikaze opened his backpack and took out scrolls and ink. Shishi stepped forward to assist, and together, they began drawing the sealing array on the scrolls. But before they could finish, there was a commotion outside. Shishi and Minato remained focused, while Uchiha Shisui placed one hand on his sword hilt, his other hand ready to form seals. Kurama Sani, still hidden in the rafters, was equally prepared to use genjutsu to create an opening for Uchiha Shisui. The disturbance outside grew louder, to the point where the ground began to shake. Suddenly, Uchiha Shisui shouted, "Watch out!" Almost simultaneously, he activated his Sharingan, performed a single-hand seal, and used the body flicker technique, splitting into multiple shadow clones that quickly positioned themselves behind Hashira Shishi and Minato Namikaze. Then, the sound of something piercing through the air filled the room as the windows and doors were shattered by a barrage of stone bullets. Uchiha Shisui's clones dashed around, deflecting the stones aimed at Shishi and Minato with their blades. Sani remained hidden, waiting for the right moment. After Uchiha Shisui blocked the first wave of attacks, the door suddenly exploded, and several figures stormed in. Shadow clones! No! Be careful, it's the Uchiha clan's Sharingan. A chaotic battle erupts. Shisui took the lead, with Sani supporting him, holding off the 3 enemy ninjas who had stormed in. Meanwhile, Hashira Shishi and Minato Namikaze finally completed the sealing array. Both simultaneously formed hand seals and pressed their hands onto the array on the scroll. In the next moment, the symbols, like tadpoles, swiftly moved, crawling onto the box of ultimate bliss. Just as the sealing process began, Uchiha Shisui, with Kurama Sani's assistance, managed to take down 2 of the attackers. The third retreated immediately. However, another wave of attacks quickly followed from outside. Dense volleys of rock bullets blasted through the walls, wooden panels, and beams. These were not only targeting Uchiha Shisui but also focusing on Kurama Sani, who was hiding in the shadows, using genjutsu. Sani dodged rapidly, but the barrage was too intense. With several muffled sounds, Sani let out a groan as his body fell from the air, crashing onto the ground, his crimson blood quickly staining the floor. "Sani!" Uchiha Shisui shouted in alarm. Shishi, who was in the middle of the ceiling, glanced back, gritting his teeth. "Minato-sensei." Minato Namikaze lowered his gaze and then withdrew his hand. "Let's save him first." But at that moment, the 4 Kyuzagakuer ninjas suddenly activated the binding array. Dark red flames surged up, weaving together like a giant net, tightening toward the center. "Jainin Namikaze, this box of ultimate bliss must be sealed, or it will awaken and devour everyone," one of the Kyuzagakuer ninjas shouted. "You're asking for it." Shishi's anger flared, and blue flames flickered in his eyes. He drew his sword, and blue flames spread along the blade, swelling with a roar. Blue flame waterfall blade. Wielding the massive blue blade with both hands, Shishi slashed down. Boom! The Kyuzagakuer's binding array, the Grand Fire Prison, was cleaved in half with a single strike, leaving a charred gash on the wooden floor. How is this possible? The 4 Kyuzagakuer ninjas gasped in shock. Though they were only Chunin, they had combined their strength to maintain the array. Even a Jainin shouldn't have been able to break it so easily. Yet this young Konoha ninja. Stunned, the Kyuzagakuer ninjas watched as Hashira Shishi, after breaking the array, immediately formed a single-hand sign, summoning 2 fire release clones that charged forward. At that moment, several more enemies rushed in, only to be met by the clones, which burst into blinding white flames before exploding. Boom! The enemies were blown back, while Uchiha Shisui carried Kurama Sani over to Hashira Shishi's side. As for Minato Namikaze, the moment Shishi shattered the Grand Fire Prison, he had already vanished. "This is bad," Shishi muttered as he sheathed his sword and knelt to check Sani's injuries. 4 wounds, each piercing through heart, lungs, liver, arteries. Cold sweat beaded on Hashira Shishi's forehead. He quickly unsealed a scroll, pulling out the medical jutsu scroll given by Nono Yakushi, and spread it over Kurama Sani's body. 8 trigram seal, release. Yin seal, release. Hashira Shishi fully released the stored chakra from his yin seal, then pressed his right hand onto the scroll. In an instant, a gentle green chakra glow spread out. The medical jutsu scroll was activated, unleashing the regeneration technique, and the green light enveloped Kurama Sani's torso. Although Hashira Shishi didn't personally know the regeneration technique, the scroll allowed him to execute it as if he did. However, Kurama Sani's injuries were severe, so Shishi focused the chakra on healing his heart and arteries first. With one hand controlling the chakra on the scroll, Shishi formed a shadow clone with his left hand to treat Sani's lung injury. The lung was pierced. If left untreated, Sani would die from blood loss and suffocation. End of chapter. Question of the day. Sani will be saved?
Thanks for listening.